Good morning, everyone. You are very welcome to day 2, the Climate Action, Economic Opportunities, Local Authorities Supporting Enterprise. The panel will be delighted to receive any questions you may have. Please use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your PC or laptop screen. If you're using an iPad, you will find this feature located at the top of your screen. Without further ado, I would now like to hand you over to the Chief Executive with Offaly County Council, Anna Marie Delaney. Thank you.
Thanks, Helena. Good morning, everyone. Joining us again for this morning for day 2 of the Climate Action and Economic Opportunities Conference, Local Authorities Supporting Enterprise. I'm delighted to see so many of you joining us again this morning. But in case you weren't here yesterday, my name is Anna Marie Delaney. I'm Chief Executive with Offaly County Council, and I'm chairing the steering group, which is driving the exploration of economic opportunities from climate change project on behalf of the local government sector. Day 1 of the conference yesterday provided us with a wealth of information from our speakers and quite a number of angles and areas that are emerging and are being recognised as areas of opportunity in striving for climate neutrality. Following the theme of the conference, Antónis de Leo Varadkar TD, in his opening address, spoke about how important it is to view climate action through the lens of opportunity in light of the transformational change that's required. We heard our speakers talk about how business models need to adapt to remain competitive and how investment is following the ever-increasing path to sustainability, with climate action now central to considerations on financial spending. Also, and very importantly, we heard how and where finance is available to local authorities to drive climate action projects. We also heard examples and case studies that delved into areas where opportunities are being capitalised upon, such as the circular economy, bioeconomy, rural working and the promotion of enterprise in rural areas, research, innovation, advanced manufacturing, sustainable transport and smart solutions to enhance our urban areas, communities and public realm, and to improve our quality of life. There were 2 key standouts from yesterday, really. Firstly, the depth and breadth of opportunities arising from climate action, as discussed, is impressive, and we'll hear even more from our speakers on that today. And secondly, the extensive range of opportunities highlighted how pivotal and critical the role of local authority is and local authorities are to enabling, facilitating and realising the opportunities at community level. It really brings home how significant the role of local authorities is in delivering on our national obligations on climate action as well. Today, we bring the focus even more towards local government and its support of enterprise. Like yesterday, we have a range of speakers in the morning and then a number of speakers presenting case studies after the morning break. We will hear today also from Minister for the Environment, Climate and Communications, Eamon Ryan TD, who will give the closing address. I want to acknowledge and thank all of our speakers for their contribution to the event today. So to give an overview of the day's format and to keep the conversation going, I have the pleasure in welcoming back and introducing our MC for the conference, Mr. Jonathan Healy. I sincerely hope you will all enjoy the event and thank you all for your participation. And I'll hand over now to Jonathan. Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning, Anna Marie. How are you? Thank you very much for that introduction. Hello, everybody. Nice to have you back. If you were with us yesterday, if you weren't, how could you possibly be doing anything else other than joining us here at the Climate Action Economic Opportunities Conference? We did, as Anna Marie mentioned, hear so many good ideas and good stories yesterday on circular economy, on financing. We were hearing fantastic stories about hubs in Clare that made us all want to move to Clare, and we heard about smart cities and the technology being introduced there. But the one thing that was very obvious is that we are in a transition phase for our economy, moving away from the old way of doing things towards the new way of doing things. And no matter what you're doing, the environment and the impact on climate change is at the heart of the decision-making process going forward. And that seems daunting because it means change, and we don't like change as a rule. As creatures, change sometimes can be resisted. But the point is, this is happening anyway, and for once, there is an opportunity for us here in Ireland to get behind that change and to become global leaders, to become the people that others turn to. What was really interesting yesterday was we heard a little bit about how other European countries are embracing this a little bit more than we are doing in Ireland, which seems like a wasted opportunity. So today, we're going to hear more about the supports that are in place, the efforts that are being made by the likes of the Local Enterprise Office, by Enterprise Ireland, by the Local Government Information Unit, how it is all being funneled and channeled, that the skills that are out there can be harnessed properly to create jobs right across the country. Because this is not just an opportunity for the East Coast or the South Coast, it is an opportunity for the entire country to develop and grow these businesses right now in this transition phase. And then later, we're going to hear from some companies that are actually on that transition phase and how they're embracing it and potentially going to become household names, big names in our country and around the world in the years ahead. So why wouldn't you get on board? Why wouldn't you join this particular train that's being run on biofuel or electricity that's coming from a green source? But anyway, getting on this train at this moment right now. Don't forget, we are looking for your questions, because basically I'm an idiot who can't ask real questions without the support of people like you who kind of know what you're talking about. So if you have a question that you want me to put to any of our contributors today, if you are watching us on a laptop, there is a Q&A button down the bottom that you can put your question into. If you're watching us on an iPad or a tablet, it's up there somewhere. So find the Q&A and do send in your questions, because it'll help inform the debate, and nobody out there has exclusivity on whether something is a good or a bad idea or a good or a bad question. So please do send those questions in, and we will put them to our contributors a little bit later. One little bit of housekeeping from me for the contributors who are watching right now. You have your allocated time. What I will do is I will kind of sneak in the background and just give you a 5-minute warning, just so we can keep to time, and most importantly, hit that coffee break at 11 o'clock this morning. So that's it, folks. Strap in. We are ready to go for our second day of our conference. And our first speaker, I'm delighted to say, is the chair of the Climate Change Advisory Council. Will you please welcome Marie Donnelly?
Good morning, everybody. And may I firstly say how grateful I am to have the opportunity to participate in this conference, which I believe is fundamentally important to our actions in terms of climate change, because if we don't make this transition a planned transition and one that works for everybody, we will not succeed. So looking at the opportunities, economic and indeed social opportunities that exist with climate action is of fundamental importance on the journey that we're undertaking now. From the perspective of the Climate Change Advisory Council, we are very well advanced now with our analysis, and are in a position to come forward very shortly with the recommendation to government on the carbon budgets for the first 5 years of 2021 to 25, 26 to 30, and 30, a provisional one then for the first part of the 2030s. And in doing this analysis, perhaps I could explain a little bit of what we were looking at and how we approached it. We have in the legislation the ambition of reducing our emissions by 51% by 2030, using 2018 as the base year. So to some extent, that gives us a fairly mathematical calculation of what the 10-year budget for this decade is. But the real challenge that we faced was, how do you divide that 10-year budget into two parts? Do you just do it 50-50? Do you have a tougher budget at the start so that we can have a more relaxed one at the end, or do you do vice versa? Do you have maybe a somewhat larger budget at the beginning and a tougher budget in the second half of this decade? And the kind of issues that we were looking at was, firstly, how pragmatic and practical and feasible is the budget, and how realistic can we be in terms of actually achieving the budget in each of the 2 5-year cycles. And in that context, we've had to look at things like, for example, the economy. Where are we with the economy, and where are we with the extent to which the economy is ready to transition to a low carbon economy? And as part of that, it's essential to look at where the economy will be impacted by the transition. And in this context, of course, local impact is the most important impact, because the impact will happen at local level, it will happen with businesses in the locality, and it will also happen with jobs in the locality. So a key element in terms of being really well able and capable of taking this journey on is to be prepared. And being prepared means we have to anticipate what's likely to happen. We have two choices. We can plan and manage the transition, or we can do nothing and just respond in a chaotic fashion as floods, storms, and other disasters hit us. So the carbon budget allows us to put a structure in place. It'll be followed by the climate action plan, which will set out the procedures, the actions, and the plans in terms of keeping within the budgets within each sector, because each sector will receive its share of the carbon budget once the government has set out its climate action plan. And just for today's purposes, the 3 or 4 issues that I wanted to really highlight. I think the first issue is to understand the areas that are most likely to be adversely affected. And here we're looking at individuals, particularly in an employment sense, and communities. Where communities are currently largely dependent on high emission activities, it is clear to say that those sectors will be impacted. So knowing and identifying the sectors in your locality that have high emissions is a first step to trying to prepare and tackle the challenges these sectors, these communities, and these people will be confronted with. Of course, as part of this, it is essential that nationally we have a very active training system in place that can allow people to switch from one activity to another, or even to take up new activities, including entrepreneurial activities. And this will be key in terms of going forward. A second area, of course, is to grasp the new opportunities, because there will be new opportunities in areas, for example, like renewable energy, where we have natural resources of wind and indeed solar, and down the road we will have marine. These are areas of job opportunities and economic development. And again, what are the issues that we need to put in place locally to support those? Do we need to think about what our infrastructure is? Do we need to think about our planning? And do we need to think about the holistic interaction of these new jobs into the economy as it currently exists? And a third area, which is very relevant, of course, to the community and to people, is where they live, where they work and where they live, and how they get around. So transport and buildings, it's a key part of our emissions. It's an area that will be targeted. We have got to look at how we can manage our transport emissions and reduce them. Big part, of course, will be through demand management, some of which will be demand reduction, but also alternative options such as electric vehicles. Likewise, in terms of our buildings, how can we manage the heating and electricity costs of running our buildings? How can we reduce the emissions associated with those? What are the alternative mechanisms that are available? In some instances, it will be district heating systems in urban areas, and I don't just mean large cities, because large towns are also ideal locations for district heating systems in the town. And of course, we also have heat pumps for areas that are distant from a potential district heating system, and therefore looking at the alternative mechanisms that are available there. And in terms of how we manage heat, thinking about when do we heat our homes, how do we heat it, what's the fuel we're using, but also let's think about the temperature. Temperature management of our building is also a very important element as we go forward. And maybe as a final area, as an introductory in an introduction to this whole area, it's the whole area of agriculture. It's fundamental to our economy, and in fact, it's actually fundamental to our society. A large share of our population live in rural spaces and work in agricultural activities in rural spaces. Ultimately, the land is going to be a very important support for us as we go forward in this climate change, because land, and especially our forests, can act as a sink. They can absorb the emissions and help us to achieve our targets. And in this context, management of the land, management of our forests will become hugely important. And it is in the rural spaces of our country that this solution will be found and can be delivered. So in this context, the whole agricultural scene not just, what is the land being used for, what products are coming from the land being processed as food products, either sold here in Ireland or exported, but also how we manage our land and how we manage our forests will be hugely important and a major contributor to the success as we go down this journey. So specific job opportunities, yes, let's get them, let's make the most of them. But let's not forget that some people will be impacted negatively by this change. So we need to ensure we have protection in place for these people, that we can help them, support them, retrain as the case may be, find alternatives as the case may be. This is essential, because I suppose the leitmotif of this transition to a decarbonised economy is that we should leave nobody behind. We're all in this together. We should all benefit from this together, and that's going to be our task going forward. Thank you very much.
Marie, thank you very much indeed for that. And there's a lot to consider in relation to that. I mean, one of the things there, the response is, yes, the right thing to do. And we have all got a responsibility to do the right thing. We know that. But the other thing is we've no choice, because if we don't do all these things, then we're going to find ourselves in a situation whereby we've got flooding, we've got all the other things that local authorities, guess what, you guys have to end up dealing with, whether you like it or not. So there is no such thing as no option here. We have to keep going. We have to keep changing. And there's a lot to take in there. And Marie will be back with us a little bit later on for our question and answer session. So if you have a question that you would like to put to her, please do get in contact with us now. The Q&A, as I said, at the bottom or at the top, depending on where you are looking for it. Now, let's bring in Andy Johnson, who is the Director of the Local Government Information Unit. Andy should be with us now. Andy, how are you?
Excuse me, I'm very well, thank you.
That's good. Good to catch you on the hop there. Yeah, the classic thing when you're waiting for ages to start and then you get a frog in your throat just as you start to speak. It happens to me all the time.
Moment, yeah.
Andy, you were going to talk about international local government mechanisms supporting transition. And supporting is really important because, as I mentioned at the start, there is a fear factor around this. There is a little bit of anxiety around this as to, well, what, how, where, when, and why should we start all of this? So I'm going to let you share your presentation screen and take control at this point for the next few minutes.
Okay, thank you. Is the screen up?
Not yet. We can try it again there now if you want to just share. We did see a little brief glimpse of it, a tease, if you will. So let's try it once more. There you go, Andy. You're sharing now.
I'm up and running. Excellent. Thank you. All right, good morning, everybody, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to this really important conference. First, a couple of thank yous. At the East Midlands Carrow, Rita and Alan have done amazingly sterling work getting this whole project off the ground and helping us with the research that we were working through. And also a thank you to John Cullen as well, because this is part of a program of research, and we built on the work that John's done, and I know he presented yesterday on the work that he's been carrying forward. So our contribution into this project is to look at the international context at a local level, and what's been going on in other countries in terms of the governance around climate change, but also in terms of practical applications, examples, case studies, and where we can find it sort of hard, crunchy information about economic growth, jobs, and new businesses that have been created. So if we start with where we were looking around for other examples, obviously we looked in Ireland, but we tried to get a spread of countries which have similar setups to that in Ireland, but also significantly different in terms of geography or overall governance systems and country cultures as well. So we've gone from the very big in terms of the USA to smaller countries like New Zealand, and obviously much more remote countries, and countries with very different geographies like Australia, and see if we can find common themes and threads that work through those. In terms of governance around climate change, then it's largely good news. I would say we were wherever we looked, we didn't find a system which was all-encompassing, comprehensive, and joined up as the one in Ireland. What we tended to find was particular local authorities taking a lead in their country within a loose policy framework, which had been set up by the national government, quite often that relying upon willful individuals within those local authorities, be that the chief executive or the political leadership, and sometimes even individuals with climate change managers and things like that, pushing things forward. What we didn't find, as I said, was the comprehensive approach and support that local authorities get within the Irish context. So that was enormously encouraging, and I think that's the important thing to bank, is that the structures are all in place to enable things to go forward really quickly and well. The other dimension to this, I suppose, what we did find in terms of how local authorities measured their progress and how well they were doing, was very different because of the lack of the comprehensive system. So what we tended to have was voluntary opt-ins into various charters, self-certification schemes, and things like that, a lot driven by net zero initiatives, etc. So that's great where it happens, but obviously it's less great in those local authorities when they decide not to opt in to various schemes that are up and running. So wanted to bank that first. The governance system is robust and in place. In terms of the climate change topics that we looked at, it's, as you can see, a fairly broad spread. Again, this has been built on the work of John Cullen at Maynooth, and the areas that he identified as being important for local authorities. I think probably the key observation here is that when you start looking across the countries that we looked in, obviously the competency scope of local authorities is different in different countries. So if you look in, for example, Scandinavian countries where their scope is really wide, they, in a Scandinavian city, the council will run almost everything. Then they have the opportunity to take on board all of these areas in a very joined up way, fairly independently, and work their way forward and through various initiatives. If you go to other countries, I suppose you might put sort of New Zealand at the other end of the scale, where the local authorities have relatively narrow competencies. They're engaged in all of these areas, but having to do it much more in partnership than acting alone. What I'd like to do now is, within these topics, is to pick out a few of them where we've identified important activity going forward, but we've also been able to have a look at the sort of comparison with what's happening in Ireland, and to see whether or not there's progress in a similar way. So one of the first case studies we identified was in Aberdeen in Scotland, where the local authority has had a long-term strategy about how do they maintain the economy after the oil industry in the North Sea has gone. And that's meant that they've been able to save up funds to manage that transition, but they've also been looking at a replacement industry that builds upon the strengths that are already there. And this is where hydrogen comes in. At the moment, it's a relatively small enterprise, but the council is supporting it by putting its buses through. That's actually a filling station behind the guys with the ribbon there. They're putting it through that filling station. And the idea is the next step for this is that's a proof of concept that they've got there. The next step is what they call in Scotland a growth deal. So that's where the local authority will pull together funding from the Scottish government, the UK government, In the past, it would also have been EU funds as well, and private sector money, pull that all together into one package so that they're able to take this idea to scale with the local authority at the heart of the whole program, and the local authority as the facilitator, not just for the money, but for the actual project as it goes forward. So an example there of a local authority within a particular system working in a particular way to get the money in. I think they're looking for somewhere in the region of 20 million euros to get this up to scale and working forward. I think we have a presentation later about this, but we already have in the Irish context the beginnings of a very similar project up and running with in Cork, in the ports, again, similar things using existing facilities and existing strengths within the infrastructure, picking a technology that works in that space. Another result we came across, one of the more successful ones, and one with really good data as well, which was very handy, was Esbjerg in Sweden, which has established itself as a European and almost global centre for renewable energy. In particular, offshore wind is a massive strength for them, and they've got really good information around how they're now in the region of about 9,000 jobs that they reckon that this facility has created, and probably more interestingly, about 250 new companies, new businesses have been established around this particular facility. So the investment, the local authority owns the port, the investment by the local authority, early spotting the opportunities, putting the investment in to transform an old shipbuilding facility into a renewable energy hub, is beginning to really pay off for that local authority with all the new business rates. And it's had an impact on the population because the jobs that are created on the back of these schemes are highly skilled jobs in new technologies. And that means that's had a really positive impact on the local economy. And we can see that this is in train within Ireland. This is unfortunately, it's a terrible picture of the proposed facilities or potential facilities at Money Point, County Clare, but the idea is the same. It's about using the advantage of the geographical location, and it's also about using new renewable technologies. In this particular example, in Esbjerg, it started off with offshore wind, and that's what they were all about, and now they're beginning to see other opportunities. There's an opportunity here in Ireland to start with different types of potential renewables right from the word go and take that forward. Another city we looked at, Copenhagen. We looked at this in terms of a couple of the categories that we saw earlier on. So we actually started off looking in terms of tourism, where
Andy, I'm just going to jump in there for a second. We might get you to turn off your camera just because there's a little bit of bandwidth issue. So we might hear you a bit better if you turned off your camera just for a few minutes.
Okay.
Apologies for this.
That's okay. It's my fault. I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yeah, try that. We can still see your slides.
Really good. Okay. So another example is Copenhagen, which we looked at initially from the point of view of it being an example of tourism and how tourism can be built, urban tourism can be built around how climate change is being addressed. And the city of Copenhagen has a very comprehensive strategy around retail, public space, all of those sorts of things. And that enables it to give it this branding of an eco-city, a European eco-city. They have the ambition to be a world eco-city, that sort of thing. And they're succeeding in that, I would argue. But underneath that, the substance, if you like, is the things that they're doing in terms of the infrastructure. And this district heating network is, I hope it comes across in the graphic, is enormous. It covers a vast area of not just central Copenhagen, but beyond that as well. And apart from the obvious benefits to the residents that are being supplied here with cheap energy and renewable energies or more efficient energies, there are also knock-on benefits to the economy as well and to businesses, because it's not just households that benefit from cheaper and more efficient energy sources. It's also businesses as well. And again, you're seeing new businesses relocating in because of the simple economics of cheaper energy. And again, this has begun within the Irish context as well. You have South Dublin City Council leading on district heating within the Greater Dublin area, picking up on the potential which has been illustrated in this map. And I know when you look at the South Dublin example, it's not just about the heating, there's all the other knock-on benefits that go along with that, which are important to address. So those are some of the examples we picked up. We picked up somewhere in the region of about 30 or 40 examples in the main reports. These are just ones where there's very obvious crossover to what's already happening in Ireland. In terms of a broader analysis, we did find, I think it's fair to say that most of the case studies that we found were local authorities dealing with the mitigation side, reducing emissions, less so on adaptation, which I have to say, I thought was a bit of a surprise. But if you'd asked me where I think local authorities' natural strengths are around the climate change agenda, then I would have said it's very obviously on the adaptation side. But most of the examples we found were on the mitigation side. And I think what that means is that there's a big overarching narrative which is driving money and interest in certain directions, and there are also, what that leaves is significant opportunities to look at adaptation as well. An example of adaptation, this is a park in New York. This has been built primarily as a flood protection measure, and we found it an interesting example because its primary function is adaptation, but that also two things about it were important. One was it was entirely funded by New York City municipality. They just decided it was extremely important and the risks needed to be managed, and so they got on and did it out of their own reserves. The other point about it, and I hope that comes across, is that it's also a lovely space. And one of the things that mixed in terms of the case studies that we found was that sometimes there was potentially a little bit too much emphasis on infrastructure and getting the job done, and not enough emphasis on thinking about the place that is being shaped as a result of these initiatives. Now, that was front and center in this. So not only does New York have much better flood protection, it also has a beautiful park and a beautiful space and a contribution to local well-being. So what have we found have been the main categories of economic benefits for local authorities from looking into climate change? Jobs, very obvious one. I mentioned 9,000 jobs which have been created in Esbjerg. There are other examples where there are plenty of jobs generated in this space. Difficult to get the exact numbers from a lot of the case studies, and we're looking to follow up on some of those, but it's important to remember that it's not just people working in the facility. There's jobs created building facilities, and then there's jobs created in the supply chain, the industries that sit around whatever scheme is put in place. There's a lot of inward investment as a result of this. It's a hot button issue for a lot of the financial money houses. They're looking to invest in climate change, and ports in particular seem to be a magnet for investment at the moment for all sorts of different technologies that sit really well within those ports. Economic growth, we've got examples in New Zealand, for example, around their tourism industry, where they've branded their tourism as being ecotourism, and that's doubled or trebled the amount of visitors they get, and in particular international visitors that they get. It's something which really helps with the local economic growth. Other bits of tourism income, I've mentioned eco-cities, and potentially there's a real opportunity in Ireland to sort of build on that brand, on the existing brand, the green brand that already exists for Ireland, but how does that become an eco green brand and strengthen that way? New businesses, lots of them being generated in different areas. I think I flagged up agriculture here because I think that's one of the potentially most interesting areas for new businesses to develop, but also potentially one of the most challenging. We did come across, again in New Zealand, they've just started about a year ago, a review of the dairy industry in New Zealand and how they can climate proof their dairy industry and make sure that it survives and thrives into the future, whilst helping to contribute to climate change targets. Business income, and businesses make money out of addressing climate change if there's new businesses. The private sector can come in and make money. So we have examples of power stations which have converted, and that's why I mentioned the example of Peat here, or existing infrastructure has been adapted, that kind of thing, and the private sector are keen to invest in that. Other economic benefits, the softer ones, if you like, the less hard economic ones are citizen well-being. We know that, again, in Australia and several projects in the USA, they've identified citizen well-being improvements in that as being absolutely key. There's I suppose one of the interesting examples around that, it will be tree planting. Lots of tree planting projects going on around the world. They're mitigation and adaptation, because they do something about carbon emissions, they lock them up, but they also provide beautiful spaces, and they tackle flooding, erosion, and things like that. So sort of multiple benefits built into those. We have the examples in Ireland of the Blue Ways and the Green Ways as being schemes which are looking at climate change as well as tourism, recreation, public realm, and well-being as well. So there are multiple benefits available, and I think that's one of the big lessons that we've learned when we try to identify what it is that people wanted to do in the first place, and then what did they get. So if you do a climate change project, you get a lot of other benefits that spin out of it if you do it well. It's not just addressing the particular climate change issue. And then the final point.
5 minutes there, Andy, if you can.
Yes, yeah. The final point here is public sector savings. If the whole system is more efficient, everybody benefits, including the public sector itself. So I could go back to the Copenhagen example, where the local authority there spends practically, I don't think they spend anything on their heating requirements, because they built the scheme which they're currently running, which provides very cheap energy and heating energy. So final thoughts around the research that we've done. Ireland is unique because it has this system-wide approach and regional structure, and is comprehensive. The comprehensivity also extends to the way that climate change is understood. So they're not picking, in Ireland, you're not picking and choosing little bits, whereas elsewhere we found it's either all about mitigation, or it's all about flooding, or it's all about something else. And also the integration of biodiversity as well within the Irish understanding is unique in terms of the way that it's comprehensive. Really, everywhere we looked, we found local leadership as being key to that transition of understanding between a global problem and how that can be dealt with in our local area. There are real opportunities. So while there are big programs and sort of very obvious trends and patterns, what actually happens on the ground is up to the local authority to interpret what's best for them within their geographical location, natural resources, skills base, and all that sort of thing. Where it's been successful, there's been a good understanding of how that all works. The returns on investment, I've mentioned that they're multidimensional. They're also long-term, which I suppose is something which everyone needs to be prepared for within all of this. So you're not going to get rich quick tackling climate change, but the benefits are there and they're built into the system. No case study is unique. We found quite a few, but we're all willing to look at how other new case studies come into the program, and keen to sort of help the CAROs to think through different challenges beyond the ones that we've already found, and study internationally again. And final point about the importance of adaptation. I think it just felt to us in the research team that there were lots more opportunities around adaptation which we could take advantage of. In terms of the project, the next steps are that we will be developing training videos which will deal with the basics around this, and then we're looking to pull together facilitated expert panels. So the case studies that I've shown you and all the other 30 odd that we've identified, we'll try and bring in the leaders, the project managers, the people who actually delivered these projects, and have them discuss what it was really like to make these things happen and what the real benefits have been. And we'll be supplementing that with interviews, which we'll disperse as well. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Andy, thank you so much for that. I appreciate the fact your line was a little bit break up type, but we did understand you, which is the most important thing. If you're still there, turn your camera back on so we can just say hello and thank you. We might hold, just let it hold up for a second, because the one thing that struck me listening to your presentation, Andy, was that, I make this, well, it's a joke regularly to my local authority clients, is that, local authorities are the solution to and the cause of most of the problems in society. It's good to see that that's an issue across the water as well. But it's the same with climate change, isn't it? That climate change, everyone's looking for climate change leadership, but at the same time, the work has to be done by somebody else. But there is a real opportunity. I love the New York thing. I mean, that for me is brilliant, because you got a public park out of what effectively was a climate change mitigation.
Yeah, it's a wonderful example, and they're beginning to pop up elsewhere.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, stay with us, because you're going to be with us for the question and answer session, which is coming up a little bit later on at 12:15. And indeed, I see some questions have started coming out already. So thank you to Deirdre, to Stefano, to Marianne, and to Ivan. We will get to your questions a little bit later. Of course, this isn't happening in isolation. It's not just local authorities doing this. All state agencies, all state actors, down to the individual, are leading the charge on this. I mean, down to me having solar panels, as I pointed out yesterday. Did I mention the fact I gloat about my solar panels powering my electricity right now? That is the kind of thing that we all need to start doing to make a difference. But the point is that everybody is moving in the same direction. And that idea of climate change being at the center of all decision making for every organization is not unique to local authorities, which is why we need to encourage businesses. We need to make sure that they have the supports that they need at every level to get to the point where they need to be on that transition journey. And another organization that is really leading the charge on this is a company that is helping thousands of Irish businesses get their goods to other markets. Of course, the organization in question is Enterprise Ireland. And to talk about promoting enterprise and creating opportunity in the transitioning economy, I'm delighted to be joined by the Manager for Regions and Entrepreneurship Division at Enterprise Ireland, Mark Crystal. Mark, how are you?
Very well, Jonathan. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. The sun has come out. It's a little bit brighter here in Cork. Where are you today?
Well, it's in Dublin and it's a bit grey and overcast here. So hopefully it's going to come up to us. You're going to send it up to us, Jonathan.
Well, yeah, we'll stick it in the post. It should be there by the end of your presentation. I'll let you share your screen there and get underway.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, I was joking earlier that I could sing HMS Pinafore if something went wrong, but no, good news, we can see your screen. So off with you.
Is that okay, Jonathan? Yeah, I'm up and running. Yeah.
You're up and running.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and I'm delighted to join the conference this morning. And over the next 20 minutes or so, as Jonathan mentioned, I suppose what I'm hoping to do is just give an overview of where we see in Enterprise Ireland the challenge for Irish enterprise in transitioning to a new economy, and what are the opportunities it's going to present as well as the challenges. So just to jump straight into it, and I suppose in some respects, I think this slide, I think kind of, if you like, it captures the key points. Sorry, that jumped ahead of me there. Climate change is the biggest disruptor, and I think as we head towards net zero emissions by 2020, it will be a defining force for business. And for what's this going to mean for our own clients, it's going to mean there will be opportunities to compete and to grow, but there will also be big demands placed on our clients by their customers, and I suppose a real requirement for our clients and for Irish companies of all scale and size and across all sectors, which is I think a key point I think hopefully I'll be able to emphasize this morning, to create sustainability plans and have the ability to be able to report on those plans to win new business. And I suppose we see this challenge through the three different areas. One is about the achievement of the CO2 targets, the whole area of company competitiveness, and underpinned by policy, which would be both national and European policy. So these kind of three key themes are areas that I'm going to focus on over the course of the next few minutes. In terms of what Enterprise Ireland do, and some people will be familiar with us, but just for those who may not be, as Jonathan said in his introduction remarks, we work with about 5,000 Irish-owned companies across all sectors, and who with a real focus on international markets. We have 10 national offices and 40 international offices who support our clients. Our companies employ about 221,000 people in Ireland. And important to note that about 66% of the jobs in our client companies are outside of Dublin. So there's a real strong regional development and regional importance to the client companies that we support. In 2020, our exports were in excess of 25 billion. And we have a combination of clients who are large, from large Irish PLCs right down to innovative startup companies. And very important to mention, I think, given the audience today, the partnership that we have with the local authorities to support micro enterprise, and the local enterprise offices who have supported over 7,000 companies and trained over 77,000 entrepreneurs and business representatives. That role and that reaching and supporting those kind of clients is obviously a key area of focus for ourselves in Enterprise Ireland too. So just to spend a brief minute or so on how we see the policy, regulatory, and I suppose the environment that's going to shape the challenge for enterprise over the next 10 years and beyond. And I think we're all going to be watching very closely the UN summit that's going to take place, and what that's going to mean internationally, and from the wide range of companies countries who will participate, and who will need to continue to support and sign up to the various measures that have been identified in the Paris Agreement. Clearly, you've got the EU Green Deal, and it's been driven at a European level, and then not to forget our own national climate action plan, which for 2021, and which will inform a lot of the actions that we'll be focused on over the next 12 months or so, which we expect to be published in the autumn of this year. So again, a very strong policy framework, both at a national level and at a European level. In terms of I suppose just delving in then to talk about our own clients and what does it mean, and this is a survey that we actually completed last year as part of our annual business review survey. And I suppose it's an important survey because it highlights some of the challenges and where are we starting from. And two questions that we focused on when we asked our clients is, how important is having a climate action response to your business? And while 25% noted that it was very important, probably of concern was the fact that only 52% said moderately important and 23% not important. And I suppose in terms of gauging the level of preparedness and the level of response, 78% of our clients in that survey were saying they hadn't yet developed a climate action response. So I suppose it's an important benchmark and important realization of exactly where we're starting from. The graph on the right, and again, I won't dwell on it, but it was an interesting bit of work that was done by the EIB, which showed just, I suppose, where Ireland is featuring in terms of investing in climate change measures in comparison to other European countries. And the story really being that we're not at the top of our chart. In fact, we're, as people can see there, quite a good way off where ideally we would like to be in terms of that investment that is going to be so important within companies. Just to broaden out, I suppose, the feedback from enterprise a little bit further, if I could, and to say that this was a survey that was done, but is looking at the foreign direct investment companies, so the larger multinational companies who are so important to the enterprise base here in Ireland, and our colleagues in the IDA Ireland completed this survey. But interesting to note on the right-hand side, what were the big issues that were coming back and the big feedback coming back from these companies. So companies, and a lot of these would be the larger multinational companies, we're talking about energy costs, the supply of energy, the need for an all of government focus on rapid development of opportunities, port development infrastructure, and also in terms of the development and rollout of renewable gases. So I think it was, again, some really rich feedback coming back, which is looking through the eyes of in this particular case, the multinational companies, and as again with responsibility for the food FDI remit, just included some of the key points that we've picked up from talking to those companies around that agenda. Clearly, the food sector is going to be a really important part of this solution and this transition as part of the wider agricultural sector. So just to move on then and to focus on, okay, so what's if there's this gap at the moment, and I think we know we still have work to do. What we really need to supposed to focus on, I think that this slide is trying to highlight the importance that we communicate the benefits of acting early to companies, and that's about highlighting the importance of being able to win new business, what customers are going to need, and I'll come on to talk about that in a few more minutes, how companies might achieve particular cost savings, and also then how they might about kind of benchmarking and going about to measure their sustainability. And there are a number of supports that, again, I think are just worth highlighting that we have within Enterprise Ireland that are available to clients. And I know the local enterprise offices have a range of supports as well, which are relevant to their client base. And these are ranging from smaller kind of like vouchers and introductory grants up to more substantial grants that will enable companies to develop the necessary business plans that are so critical to their I suppose sustaining and growing their business in the new economy. So if we just maybe delve a little bit deeper then into this issue of competitiveness and what exactly are we talking about, and I think what we're saying is that really it's going to be critical that Irish companies can verifiably sustain have sustainability credentials that will be essential for them to win business and to hold on to the business that they have. That we need to make sure that companies, I suppose, understand both the risks and the opportunities that exist to them, and also the type of investment that's going to be required within their companies to make sure that they are able to compete and to verify their credentials, their climate credentials in this space. Two of the points I just would highlight that I've mentioned at the bottom of the slide. We recognize there is going to be a need for significant capital investment in companies, whether that's around new technology or whether it's around energy changes that are going to be required. And this is going to be, I think, a big feature of our supports that we'll focus on providing to companies over the coming years, and in working in partnership with many other agencies across the public sector. So I think this need for investment is something that I think is going to be very significant. And maybe just to kind of maybe put a bit of flavor on that, and this is kind of an interesting slide. This is feedback that clients have given us from buyers who they are trying to sell into. Okay, and these will be international, well-known buyers who are asking these questions of their suppliers now, and of Irish companies who are trying to win business with them. So, does your company have an environmental policy? Provide evidence of what your organization is doing to maximize its reduction in carbon footprint. In the second case there, which is looking at in the provision of vehicles. So this is becoming part of procurement. It's becoming part of public procurement in some countries, but in with big corporates who Irish companies are looking to target, they are now starting to ask questions of our companies. And actually interesting, if you look at this slide, it's not just in big emitting sectors. Okay, so these are direct quotes that we've taken from clients of ours across the food sector, yes, construction, but interesting just to look at the last one at the bottom of the slide there, which is a technology SME, and which is highlighting the point that just because you're a professional services company, this agenda is relevant to you. It's you don't have to be a big manufacturer, a big cement producer, or a big food producer. This issue is going to actually be across all of sectors, and again, all companies of scale and size, because it's going to be driven by customers, by who are going to require this of their suppliers. And in terms of as we look at what a company transformation journey might look like, what we're focusing on, I think, and again, there are people I'm sure who are very familiar with this, but this idea of it's not just going to be the direct emissions that are the scope 1 emissions, it's also going to be companies will need to look at those indirect emissions, scope 2, and indeed scope 3, so their full carbon footprint. And I think as we're starting to work with our clients, they're trying to engage with, well, develop that understanding, that awareness, and support companies on that journey, but to help them to recognize that it's not just energy savings, it's not just the fuel that the companies use, it's going to be right the way across their full business. This agenda is going to impact right the way across, from yes, how they turn on the lights in the morning, to actually how they package and sell their product in the market that they're targeting. And some of the areas that we're focusing on, will again, through the supports I've already mentioned, how we can help companies to create a vision, to create an action plan, and really to develop a strategy that's going to be fit for purpose for that company, as well as looking at questions like, is there new partners the company will need to work with, and how are they going to be able to then demonstrate the results, and to be able to show that they can verify, I suppose, their carbon footprint and their sustainability credentials. So, focusing on then what's this going to mean for our companies, and the first thing to say is this is about it's about awareness. We're very focused, I think, on raising the profile of this agenda, and it's something that I think we will be doing more so, and I think driven by the likes of the Climate Action Plan, again, which will be published this year. At this stage, I think, again, reflecting on the fact that I talked about earlier on, where the starting point, it's really about encouraging companies to start that planning, and to help with that initial planning that's so needed. Not just to look, as I said, at one aspect of the business, but to try and apply this lens right the way across the full of the enterprise. And that's going to lead to companies, yes, identifying immediate measures that they can take, but to really develop a more comprehensive sustainability business plan, which is going to look, as we said there, looking at the research and innovation agenda within the company, looking at customer needs, looking at skills and management capability, which is another area that we think is going to be very, very important. And also then the types of financial supports and investment that the company is going to require. And again, we know that companies are going to have to be able to show these plans, demonstrate their carbon footprint, their ability to manage their carbon footprint, and how they're going to reduce it if they want to attract investment in from national or international investors. And then focusing on how they might collaborate more effectively with stakeholders, again, across that full range of the business, looking at scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. So I suppose maybe just to take it on and to say, okay, so what is this going to mean for local government? And again, we'd be really interested in getting people's thoughts and feedback on this. Firstly, I think there's an awareness and leadership role that is absolutely going to be required. And local authorities are really well positioned, I think, in our view, to lead and to play a hugely important role in this. And that's about communicating the urgency of the transition. I think again that emphasis on procurement, which and how public procurement takes place, and wider procurement, I think, is something that, again, I think the local authorities are hugely versed in and experienced in. There's clearly that supporting companies, whether they're small companies or startup companies, to on the next wave of new technologies. We know, and again, earlier this week I attended the Accelerate Green launch down, which is a new accelerator on board in Mona, which is looking at, well, established companies who are looking to develop and scale it, again, providing solutions that will be so important, but also the next wave of startup companies. And I think also this idea of test bed for new technologies is going to be something that I think is going to be really important. Technology and technology solutions will be at the heart of this, and I think the local authorities can play a really proactive and positive role in partnership with agencies like ourselves to help deliver them. And then in terms of, I suppose, encouraging that level of innovation by focusing, yes, on the need for enforcement, but recognizing the opportunities that exist as well. A second area that I think is maybe not, doesn't get maybe a lot of attention in this debate up to now, but I think we think is going to be really important, is the whole area of skills, and ensuring that we have the necessary skills right the way across the full economy to be able to manage this transition. And again, that's going to be skills within companies, but it's going to be skills within, I'd imagine, the local government, across the full public sector, to be able to help the full of the economy and society to transition itself. So whether that's around planning, whether it's about engineers, whether it's about utility providers, etc. And if we think about the new technologies like offshore wind and some of the developments that are likely in that sector, again, making sure that we as a public sector and indeed that the private sector have the necessary skills is something that I think it will be of real significance and real importance. And then going on to an area that, again, was mentioned by Maria in her opening remarks this morning, the whole area of infrastructure clearly is going to be so important, because the infrastructure that's available to to companies underpins their competitiveness. And that's about, again, as we've talked about, the electrification of industrial processes, which is going to require very significant change within companies. The need for to be able for communities to be able to respond to extreme threats, as has already been mentioned, but also area like public transport options, and indeed the whole area of remote working hubs, which again is something that I know the local government and the local enterprise offices, as well as many other organizations regionally, have been so important in, but again will be a very important part of the response to this particular agenda.
5 minutes there, Mark, just FYI.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. And in terms of the local authorities being very, very centrally positioned and well positioned to be able to respond to it. And lastly, then I think in terms of what this might mean for local government, and I think this applies to the local government and indeed agencies like ourselves. But I think that this is going to be a really collaborative effort that's going to require probably an enhanced level of collaboration and engagement. Because it's going to have so much be far-reaching in terms of enterprise, communities, all parts of society, to help us make this full transition. And I think from an Enterprise Ireland perspective, we need to think about, well, how our funding supports that are available to companies can help, but also looking at any future regional funds that we might be asked to administer on behalf of government. Again, applying a sustainability and a climate lens to them to ensure that they're contributing to the solution here and driving this agenda. And we have spent a good bit of time, I suppose, looking at, can we do more around feasibility in this area? Can we support whether their existing regional projects to look at further work in this area, or we will have to consider in the future new ways that we might be able to provide funding in this area. So I suppose in conclusion from me, I think this is unquestionably going to be at the heart of Enterprise Ireland and Enterprise Ireland strategy for the next number of years. It's a very significant transition that's going to be affect not just, if you like, the companies that are identified as the big emitters. This is going to be an issue that's going to go across all sectors of our economy, affect all of our companies of all sectors, and indeed at different stages of growth. And it's something that I think is really going to be critical if we want to ensure we have the competitive enterprise base that we currently have, and actually to grow that enterprise base into the future, which is so important to provide jobs and employment across every county and every region in Ireland. So I'll leave it there, Jonathan, if that's okay.
Mark, thank you so much indeed, and great presentation. Thank you for going through all the detail, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is at the core of everything that we're going to be doing from here on in, and there's no point in coming at it in a scattergun approach. We have to have coordination. It has to be joined up thinking. So thank you for that. Some questions have come in that we will get you a little bit later on, but I'll leave you turn off your camera just for now. Lots of people are getting in contact via the Q&A. Keep those messages coming in. Fergal Reedy of Cork City Council, just down the road from me here. More of a comment, similar to the New York project, Cork City are proposing a new linear blueway park along its quays as part of the flood adaptation strategy for the city, and particularly its docklands, for a new brownfield development supported by the NDP and the URDF. So that's just another example of how it can be all joined up together. And as we know, Cork City has a flooding problem. It's only going to get worse with climate change. Now is the time that we need to do something about it. And those plans do indeed look good. Thanks for the message, Fergal. And do indeed keep those messages coming in throughout the morning. So Enterprise Ireland is one way in which companies can be supported. But as we know, the biggest number of companies in the country right now are in that SME sector, with a lot more of the S than there is of the M. And as a result, where do they turn to for support? Well, it's their local enterprise office. And we have a fabulous network of LEOs right around the country that are doing incredible work, getting those companies up off the ground and ready for business, not just internally, but exporting as well. And they love nothing more than when one of theirs flies the nest and hides off to join Enterprise Ireland. Well, we are going back to County Clare, where we heard so much yesterday about how wonderful it is. And no doubt our next speaker is going to reinforce all of those thoughts as we talk about supporting change locally. Pádraig McElwee, chair of the Local Enterprise Office Network, and of course, Clare man himself is with me, or at least working in Clare, in case I'm after offending you. Pádraig, how are you?
I'm not so bad, Jonathan. I'm an adopted Clare man at this stage.
You see, that was it. I knew there was something at the back of my mind. There's something about that's drawn you in, Clare. We heard a huge amount yesterday from Pat as well about who's a Limerick man who's after taking a second home and dual citizenship. Anyway, tell us a little bit about what Leo are doing.
Well, Jonathan, I suppose Mark actually set the scene quite well, and he gave a good overview. And as you know, we've a reach of over 7,500 clients base, which really gives us a big reach. And what's important is that there's 31 local enterprise offices, and we are in each of the local authorities. Are you able to see the presentation okay?
Yeah, your presentation is not in presentation mode. So just there you go. That's it, Pádraig.
Excellent. Always good when technology works. But really what's important, and in the graphic on the right of the screen, it's the pre-start, start and grow. So we're very much at the early stage. And what I would say, we're very much at the practical element of this journey and the impact it is of supporting change locally. And based on the research that Mark alluded to earlier, you know, the top process came right. What can we do? How can we get all these small businesses? How do we start them on the journey? And we came up with a pilot program that launched back last March called Green for Micro. And in simple terms, what that is that program is aimed to help prepare small business for a low carbon, more resource efficient economy of the future. And it's simple. It's a free consultancy. You get up to 2 days consultancy. And the target audience for that is micro enterprises, which are enterprises employing less than 10 employees. And the idea behind that is we put a consultant into that business, because the reality is many small businesses, they hear all this talk and they know about climate change and carbon. They're saying, well, you know, how does that impact on me? Or I'm too busy, I don't have time to do anything about this, or I'm too small, this is not relevant to me. So in a way, this consultancy is part of educating them. It's about going in, looking at their specific business and looking what actions they can take. And in the initial project scope for this, we've looked at a number of areas: resource efficiency, renewable energy, environmental management, carbon footprint, life cycle, eco design. Circular economy is actually coming out as a big one. Sustainable strategy, green procurement, been touched on at the higher level, but it's also relevant in the small sector. Logistics, packaging is actually a very big one in the initial reports. And just communicating to your employees about the whole green agenda. The reports for this project are starting to come in, and that'll inform where the next stage in this process goes. But just there, a reference there in the packaging, that has actually been the initial win, in inverted commas, that we're seeing coming through. How companies can maybe reduce the packaging of their material in areas like plastics, etc. And we see that across all sectors, particularly in the food sector. We actually see the climate change agenda as an actual opportunity for a lot of businesses. And we see that there is a potential to save costs at the very simple level, your energy costs. But it's also be more efficient in how you use your business, how you use your energy, your water, your materials, anything that runs the business day to day. Reduces your carbon footprint and greenhouse gas emissions. And that's really important, because that's now becoming a calling card. That's become something that you can fly a flag and say, we are doing this, we are taking this action. And that leads to the next stage. And it was touched on in Mark's presentation. Businesses now look to what are the green credentials of the business they're sourcing from. Are they adopting good practices? And we're starting to see a trend where there's now a bias towards doing business with business that have those important credentials. So we see this Green for Micro as a way for those small micro businesses to start flying that flag and saying, listen, we are taking action, we are moving in the right direction. And that opens up opportunities for them. And again, Mark referenced there the FDI sector. We actually, in Clare here, we ran a project a couple of months ago where we asked a number of the FDI companies to come in and do a talk with our local small providers. And interestingly, the most common theme that came out from that is, what was their green credentials? And the reason being, a lot of the FDI companies have specific carbon emission targets, and the way they achieve those targets is through their supply chain. So I would take the view it's an absolute imperative that any of our small businesses that have the ambition or are already supplying into that FDI sector, they've no choice. They absolutely need to get on board with appropriate actions to reduce their own carbon footprint and be able to demonstrate good sustainability practice. And ultimately what that is about increasing the resilience of the business into the future. Let's be honest, our small businesses have had a massive shock over the last 2 years. And to be fair and understandable to them, it's probably been their primary focus is surviving on COVID. But equally, it has given them an opportunity to stand back and look at their businesses. And we're now starting to see a trend of where businesses are saying, okay, what steps do I need to take to literally protect myself from future economic shocks? And one of those is making sure you get on board with your carbon footprint and your energy efficiency. Helena, could I ask you to play a video there? Because I think this video demonstrates at a very simple level steps that small businesses can take, but have the potential to have a massive impact. So Helena, I'll hand back to you.
For a long time, the industry became almost more about the packaging than the product. We looked at how we could eliminate the packaging. The obvious answer was a glass vase. The customer can keep the vase or return it to us to continue the cycle of reusing, and they've really embraced that. So while there was an initial cost for the glass vases, the amount of time that the team have saved in preparing packaging and wrapping bouquets has been hugely significant. So not only are our customers happy, but we've increased our customer base because people are now coming to us to know, are we the florist who use the glass vases? City centre deliveries were quite time consuming for us, with traffic and loading bays and one-way systems. The cargo bike is a super way to get from A to B quite efficiently. With the takeaway coffee, even though we were using compostable cups, we began to see how much waste there actually was. So we switched to a cup deposit scheme. To-go cup is where the customer pays €1 deposit for the cup and they get that €1 back when they return the cup. So that made us think about the plastic milk bottles. So we switched to a local organic dairy, Glown Cross Dairy, who supply their milk in glass bottles, and we get a 50-cent rebate for every glass bottle we return. And because the bins are now more manageable, our refuse costs have actually reduced. So customers have become much more environmentally aware, so it's really important that we're able to offer them options to help them make a greener choice. And not only is that good for the environment, we've found that's been really good for business. The climate emergency can seem like such an overwhelming problem, but we've been amazed at the impact our small changes have had. As business owners, we really shouldn't underestimate the impact that we can have.
Thanks, Selena. I'll just bring back up. No, I think that just that example has hopefully shown people just what are the simple steps that businesses can take as they embark on this journey. And as you will see from that video, some of the steps, they're very simple, they're quite small. But if you have every small business, the 7,500 businesses that we support, if they all took those little steps, that could have an overall massive impact on us locally. But we are conscious, Green from Micro is really only the start of the journey. It is really dipping a toe in the market, in the water, and it's about educating companies. We are consciously aware that those companies will have to take further steps and they may require investment. So that's where we look at our of up to 2,500 available to make some important changes in your energy efficiency, etc. And what it'll see is, as we learn from that, we'll see what supports are relevant. But we also have grant support, and Mark touched on it, and Marie touched on it earlier. There is new opportunities arising. So again, we have grant support that will facilitate that. And that probably brings us to, we also, through Enterprise Ireland, are an enabler of agile research and development, because there is a huge amount of research and development required in this sector. Let's be honest, we don't know everything about it. And companies need to invest in research and development to look towards the future. We provide a lean program as well, which is very similar to Green for Micro, but it's very much focused on the cost savings. And the idea behind that is, if we can make our businesses more efficient from a cost perspective, not only does it make them more profitable, but it also frees up capital for them to make the necessary investment. And I just want to mention the SEI Energy Academy. It's a fantastic resource, a free resource.
Now, we may have lost Pádraig temporarily. He came back the last time, so let's hope he does come back. Pádraig,
really,
sorry,
we'll try that.
Pádraig, you just dropped out there. You might just pick up that point again if you can, and maybe turn off your video just for a moment.
Okay, which point was that?
You were just talking about the grant there.
Okay, At the grant end, Jonathan, it dropped out, was it?
No, I think you were gone down. You were gone to further down. So just maybe pick up at a point you're choosing, Pat.
Okay, I'll just mention on the grants office, everybody's aware of it, but the lean program, again, just building on the Green for Micro, is about effective cost management and trying to save costs in the business to free up capital for future investment. And the last point there is the SAI have an Energy Academy, which provides free training, online training. And that's important for employees of companies. So to educate them in the whole green agenda, but also to start to build a culture of energy efficiency around your small business. And I'll just touch in the Midwest under the Regional Skills Forum, we've run a pilot program with called Digi Echo. Because what we found is companies transform to more energy efficient machinery in that their employees can't use them because a lot of these are digitally enabled equipment. So we also need to train businesses, and that comes into the digitalization agenda that's very much important for the future of Ireland. So we are working on that as a pilot project. It's a free one, and it's actually been well received by businesses. So it is looking to the future. And I suppose from our point of view, let's say we're rolling up the sleeves in 31 local enterprises around the country. We're just engaging with those small businesses and we're starting them on their journey. And hopefully, Jonathan, as you mentioned earlier, our goal is if we can get some of these small businesses transferred into Enterprise Ireland with Mark and his team, then we're all making progress. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much indeed. I'll let you turn the camera back on now just to remind us of what you look like. Because I hate when we have to turn the camera off because it just means that it's like I'm being rude.
Okay, well,
and my camera is now glitching as well. So it's going very well. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to go to a break for our coffee. And we're all glitching, so hang on, we'll see if we break. We will be back at 11:15, and I'll have put money in the internet in the meantime. So I think we're going to go for a break there if we can. So we'll pause for a break and we'll be back very shortly.
Very good, thanks.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good break there and that you did have a snack, you did stretch, you did hydrate, you did listen to music, and you did relax, because that's what we all need to do to decompress after our first session this morning. Here's hoping you took a lot from it. Thank you so much for the questions that have come in to us as well. We will be getting to those a little bit later on. And big shout out to Caroline Corrigan, who yesterday was lamenting the lack of biscuits in her house for the tea break. She has got in contact by Twitter today, and she has said, you'd be glad to hear that after yesterday's embarrassing no biscuit ordeal, and it was embarrassing, Caroline, but we're glad that you raised it. She has made working from home in-house catering today. The situation has been rectified with a freshly baked croissant, which is far above and beyond my capabilities, but fingers crossed that there are others who've enjoyed freshly baked treats as well and are ready for round two. Thanks to Pádraig as well, by the way, Pádraig McElwee of the Local Enterprise Office. Some questions have come in from him. For him, he is joining our panel in around an hour's time. So we are into the rapid fire session now of session 2, where we have got a couple of businesses who are at the sharp end of what is happening on the ground in terms of transition and moving towards a more environmentally sustainable business model for the future. We were in Clare. Let's go next to speak to Catherine Sheridan, who is with Green Rebel and EIH2, helping Ireland take leadership in tackling climate change. Catherine, hello, how are you?
Good morning, Jonathan. How are you keeping? It's great to be here this morning, and thanks very much for the invite.
It's lovely to have you. Thanks so much for joining us. What I'm going to ask you to do is to turn on your presentation there if we can, see if we can get that part working first of all. And there you have it. Switch to presentation mode and off you go. You have until 25 to 12 and I will give you a 5-minute warning. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks very much. So good morning, everybody. It's fantastic to have an opportunity to speak with you today, particularly to talk about two of our companies, Green Rebel and EIH2, and how we're hoping to work and collaborate with everyone to help Ireland take leadership in tackling climate change. And it really shows you the opportunities that are available to us. I've actually travelled up this morning from Cork to Eastkey, and I'm sitting in Feeney's Centra, where they've helped me out with their Wi-Fi. So it really shows that the opportunities for us, we are coming from Cork, but the opportunities are available to us nationwide. So the first slide I'd just like to start with, and I know everyone has been speaking very clearly to this, about the problem that's facing us at the moment in the world in relation to climate change and how we all need to take action. But I think it's very important as well for us to realize it's not the only problem. There are so many problems facing us at the moment. When we consider what's happening with the COVID-19 pandemic, and also when we think about housing, we have to realize that climate change is one of the things that people have got on their plate. And we have to always make sure that we're considering it in the round, that it's very important and it's going to have a benefit fixing it to everybody. But it is just one of the difficulties facing us. So when we think of climate change, we're frequently thinking of the impact that it can have on society and things that we might need to change. But some of the solutions are actually going to present us with economic opportunities. So, for example, if we think about the electricity situation that we have at the moment, and in Ireland, everyone will be very aware of how last week and the week before we had reports from EirGrid and the CRU relating to the need for us to have security of supply with our electricity. And part of that is we're going to need to consider electricity in relation to how it can be sustainable, of course, but also in relation to the affordability of the solution and also the security of supply so that we can continue to have the quality of life that we have in Ireland. So then we also think not every solution can be electrified. We can't plug in everything, and we're going to need to have carbon fuels as part of the solution for Ireland. So this is something, again, that, you know, at the climate change, it's something we're going to have to change. We're going to have to move away from our whole reliance on fossil fuels, but we're also going to have a solution to go to. And then when we think of some of our key industries that we have in Ireland, and as we all know, we're fantastic for producing food in Ireland, but we also need to be looking at it from the point of view of how can we reduce the emissions. So we, in our suite of companies, had a look at, what that would mean for us. And then we said, how could we look at this in relation to opportunities? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our three companies that we have. So Green Rebel, we looked at what is happening at the moment with the need for renewable electricity. And Ireland has an incredible offshore resource when it comes to our wind. So we felt, how could we support the wind developers to capitalise on what that means for Ireland? And that's why we established our company, Green Rebel. So what Green Rebel does is we gather and we prepare data for the wind developers so that they can capitalize on Ireland's wind. And this will enable us to have a secure and independent energy future for Ireland. And I'll tell you a bit more about Green Rebel in a minute. So our second company that I'd like to tell you about is EIH2. And what EIH2 is looking at is capitalizing on the opportunity that the need for carbon-free fuels has created for Ireland. So what EIH2 are going to do is we're going to use renewable electricity to create green hydrogen. So green hydrogen is so-called green because it's created from renewable sources, and it's a zero carbon fuel for industry, and also that can be used for transport. And the fantastic thing about hydrogen is it's really good at storing and transporting energy. So when we have our offshore wind and we have lots of it, we can convert it into hydrogen. And then when we need that hydrogen on windless days, we can convert the hydrogen back into electricity. And even some of the modern combined cycle gas turbines that are used in Ireland today, they're already able to take on 30% hydrogen as a fuel source. So then a third company, I spoke earlier about our need to decarbonize our industries and how we're using energy to produce some of the really important commodities for Ireland, like our food, like our hospitals that we have. How can we help them to have a more energy efficient solution? And what Action Zero does is it creates and deploys groundbreaking self-funding solutions to decarbonize heat across a number of sectors. And we're using a patented heat pump system called the Escopod. And now what the Escopod is excellent for is for generating heat up to a little bit under 100 degrees. So not necessarily our steam, but for things like hospitals and for food companies that need really hot water, we can use electricity. And really this means that if we have an electricity solution for heat and we have got zero carbon fuels generating that electricity, it really is a zero carbon solution. So I mentioned there Green Rebel, so I'd like to tell you a little bit more about it. And I'm an engineer by background. So when we start talking about some of the data solutions, I get very excited. Because if you think about what an offshore wind company is going to need to establish itself and to fully capitalize on Ireland's wind, it's going to need a lot of information. And the information it needs is to do with, well, first of all, going to the bank and saying, here's how we can prove that we're going to get a return on investment because we have this fantastic set of data. We know when the wind is blowing, we know what direction it is. We know what information is available about the seabed. So what kind of conditions are there for us to build the infrastructure that we're talking about? So we've got some pictures here of our planes, of which we have two, and these planes, I mean, they're incredible. They can take as much information in a day that all of the photos that get uploaded on Facebook in a day. So what they do is they get the information on the birds and mammals, because when we're looking at an energy solution for Ireland, not only do we need to make sure that we have enough energy and it's sustainable, but we must do it in a way that protects the environment. And the Marine Area Planning Bill is really looking at how we can progress our projects off the coast of Ireland in a way that protects the marine environment. So that's what our planes are doing. And we've two at the moment, and we've a third on the way. So we have a number of ships as well, a number of boats. And what they do is they go out and they really have a really detailed study of the water and what the ground bed is like, so we can understand what impact we'll have on fish, but also what impact we'll need, what sort of foundations, for example, that the offshore wind turbines would need. And then on the left, on the top left, we've got a picture there of our LiDAR buoy, and they're really exciting because what they do is they can gather all the information, sit there for 6 months. They can tell us about the water quality, about the wind speed. They can go up hundreds of meters in the air to see what kind of information there is about wind. So it really makes sure that we're building our offshore wind infrastructure for Ireland in such a way that we can capitalize on it. But all of that is fine. But what we really need is expert people, and we need them across all levels of society. So it gives a tremendous opportunity for people to transition from traditional roles like fishing, for example, to be involved in the clean, green, future energy jobs that are really exciting. So from a standing start during COVID-19, we now have 70 staff employed in 3 locations. And that's the fantastic thing. We're in a situation where we're looking for locations where we can establish ourselves all over the country so that we can support where the wind or where the offshore wind developers want to set up. So it's not just the East Coast, it's not just the South Coast. We're looking here today, and that's why I'm contacting you from Sligo, is because we're looking at some of the infrastructure that's available and some of the options that might be available to us there. So that's a little bit about Green Rebel. Next, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our green hydrogen company, EIH2, and in a second I'll go on and I'll tell you about one of our sites. But just in case you're sitting in the audience and you're wondering, you know, did I miss something on hydrogen? Is it really as simple as it sounds? And the great news is that it is. So EIH2, we're going to be a first mover, and we're looking to kickstart Ireland's green hydrogen economy. And what we're doing is we're looking at combining local market intelligence with international expertise. Other countries have already gone down this route and are further along than we are. So we're going to combine the two to make sure that hydrogen can play a key role in Ireland's future economy. So if you look at what's happening in Europe, they've got the European Green Deal and the hydrogen strategy and the energy and system integration strategy. So at a European level, what they've realized is we can't think of energy in terms of one sector alone. We can't just look at electricity and we can't just look at gas. We've got to consider the whole thing together. So what happens is sometimes you've got too much wind and you have to curtail it and you can't use it. And sometimes there's not enough wind, and that means we have to burn fossil fuels at the moment to generate electricity. And this is where hydrogen comes in. Hydrogen can take renewable electricity and it can use it through a system or through a process called electrolysis to generate hydrogen from water. So water rather, is H2O. So what happens is the electricity gets passed through the water and then it separates out the hydrogen and the oxygen. And then electricity, for example, is great at instantaneous use, but it's not really good for storing electricity or transporting it. But hydrogen really is. It's a really good fuel for transporting and storing electricity or energy. We can take the hydrogen and we can use it in transport. We can use it in shipping and aviation. We can even use it we can take our 2.7 billion euro asset that is the national gas grid, and we can use that gas grid to transport the hydrogen to high heat industries or hard to decarbonize sectors like cement, like alumina, and we can transport the hydrogen to them so that they can have zero carbon emissions hydrogen at point of use. And again, we can store the hydrogen so that on those times when we don't have enough wind to give us a renewable electricity system, we can use the hydrogen to convert back into electricity and give us that zero carbon fuel. So I'll tell you a little bit about our first project that we have. It's a 50 megawatt facility in East Cork in an area called Ahada. And this is one that gets me really excited because this is my actual neighborhood. So in May 26th, when I realized that this project was up and going, I just got so excited because in the East Cork area, there's two combined cycle gas turbines. ESB own one and Bord Gáis own the other one. There's also Ireland's Irving oil gas refinery, and there's electricity and gas infrastructure in the area. And it's also coastal, so there's a lot of seawater there should we choose to use that. So what we're looking at doing is we're looking at capitalizing on the local information we have and the international expertise that we can gain from countries that are further ahead of us, like Australia, for example, as well. Germany would have a very developed hydrogen strategy, and a lot of the manufacturers like Siemens are further down the road than we are. So we can combine those two. But really what we're looking at doing in the area as well is working with the community, because for us, a really key part of making sure our project is successful is working with the community, because for the changes that we need to make in the energy sector, it's not just us within private sector or within companies. We really need everybody to work together and have a new way of doing things. So that brings me on to local authorities. And local authorities really are key enablers for economic opportunities. And I'm speaking from experience here because my first 10 years of my career was working with Cork County and City Council. And I really understood from my time there initially in water services to understand how a local authority can provide opportunities, can read what's happening in an area and can understand what they can contribute and how they can win businesses to the area. Earlier on this year, I was delighted to attend Cork Harbour Economy, the Global Economic Platform event that Tim Lucy spoke very, very passionately about the opportunities that were there presenting. And I suppose I'm biased, I'm from Cork. I'm talking about what happened at Cork and a Cork event because that's familiar to me. But it really shows that, you know, for a local authority, the economic role, but also the social role really works well for what's happening in climate change. Because the co-benefits of addressing the difficulties that climate change presents are that we can create better quality of life for our citizens, so that when people are working in a town, they're having a smaller commute and they're having really exciting green, clean jobs that are happening. Because what we need is a solution that works for everybody, not just for one part of the sector. And that's where local authorities come in. They're going to know their own area, and they're going to know exactly what would benefit their area, what they can do to support it, where the infrastructure is, what kind of companies they want to win, what are the outputs of it, and they have that holistic understanding. They also have an opportunity of engaging with members of the public through Climate Action regional offices, and also through the elected local representatives who have the mandate to represent the community, and also to engage with national policymakers on behalf of both the local authorities and the communities. So it's a key enabler for companies like EIH2 and like Green Rebel. As we're looking to progress different locations for our businesses around the country, we're seeing where are we able to partner up with local authorities, like we're doing with Cork County Council, who have, absolutely been providing us with insight and that local knowledge that we wouldn't necessarily know ourselves about how we can develop to support it.
About 5 minutes, Catherine.
That's fantastic. And thanks, Jonathan. I just have one more slide anyway. So yeah, so that's a fantastic view for me, because as I say, with local authorities, there's going to be a slight different solution for everyone. But the way I look at these offshore wind companies is that the Ørsteds and the Statkraft, these companies are like the Facebooks and the TikToks and the Intels and the Microsofts. They just happen to be in the wind energy. So if we had an opportunity in Ireland to create desire for these companies to come and set up, we'd have a very clear understanding of it. It just so happens that there are different industries, but in some ways they're even bigger. In some ways, what it will enable us to do is to capitalize on the massive resource that we have offshore. So we have about 70 gigawatts of energy offshore. And at the moment, we're proposing to bring 5 gigawatts of them onto the electricity network. So we're going to flood the electricity network with as many electrons as it can cope with. But what would be fantastic is if we could give another route to market for some of those electrons. What we could do is we could say, let's have offshore wind auctions just for hydrogen production, so that we can absolutely have as much electricity and as much electrification as we can. But for our planes, for our cement factories, and here's the kicker, we could also export the hydrogen. So we could be a net exporter for Ireland. And what that would mean is when Ireland becomes an exporter of both molecules and electrons, so our hydrogen and also our electricity, there's co-benefits, because we're going to have new industry and we're going to provide the climate leadership for the other countries. So MARI, the research industry, would say that the net zero energy system could create at least 50,000 jobs for Ireland. And these are brilliant jobs. They're really exciting jobs. They're the jobs that the students who are protesting on the street at the moment are going to be absolutely dying for. And that's what we're finding as we have our platforms on Instagram and on TikTok. We're getting so many people applying for our jobs because these are the jobs of the future that they want. In the UK, the hydrogen strategy said that with 5 gigawatts, which is a comparable amount as what we're putting on the electricity grid, that it could create 9,000 jobs, but it could also attract 4 billion euros of private investment, because this doesn't all have to come from the Exchequer. This can be a fantastic winner of investment from pension funds and from investment banks. So if we bring it to a bit local to finish up, this is a fantastic picture taken off the coast of Cork of some of our guys who have transitioned from traditional fishing jobs where they were harvesting the natural resources that we have in Ireland. It just so happened to be fish. Well, what we're creating is an opportunity for people who have traditional jobs, as well as the new graduates, to transition to be part of, or to transition to be part of the new future for Ireland, where people have a fantastic quality of life, and we have an affordable, sustainable and secure energy system for Ireland. Thanks, Jonathan.
Catherine, thank you so much for that. And credit to Centra in Easky, who has the strongest of all the internets that we have used this morning so far. Lots of questions have come in for you. It just shows you the breadth of opportunity there. It's not just one location, it's possibly around the coast, and different ways in which the green energy could be both brought ashore and sustained right around the island of Ireland. Catherine Sheridan, thank you very much for joining us from Green Rebel. We will talk to you again on the panel at around 12:15 from Easky in County Sligo. Now the telly's gone off. I tell you, it's all It's a little bit frantic today. There we go. Telly's back on now. Right, let's go from East Key and Sligo. I think to Burren County Offaly. Niall Fay of Grant Engineering. How are you?
Morning, Jonathan. Good. How are you?
Good now. Fingers crossed that your video holds up as well. And your picture in the background isn't going to change. Tell us a little bit about Grant Engineering, and if you can share your screen there, we'll have a look at your presentation. While we're, with that is kick it in there. Yeah, perfect. And if you click it in the presentation mode, I do have to ask you, Niall, the picture on your desk has caught my eye. Who's in the picture?
Where, sorry?
Just directly over your shoulder.
There to my left here.
Yes.
Yeah, my late dad, yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
So there he is, still making sure everything is run right. Very good.
Going, yeah.
Over to you, Niall. Off with you.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Morning, everyone, and thanks for this opportunity to present to you. My name is Niall Fay, CEO of Grant Engineering, and during this presentation, I will give you a brief introduction to Grant Engineering, show a short video, highlight some of the opportunities and some of the challenges for us as a company. For those that don't know, Grant Engineering manufactures and distributes residential heating appliances and systems. My presentation will focus on residential heating, its opportunities and challenges with climate change. And just to make you aware, we are not in the gas market, so I won't be referencing this market in my presentation. So a brief background onto Grant Engineering. We're headquartered in Burren County Offaly. The group employs over 400 people. We have 360 employed here on site in Burren, where we do all our marketing, manufacturing, sales, and distribution for the Irish market and our international markets, except in the UK, where we have a subsidiary in Wiltshire, where we employ 80 people. And then we've recently opened another subsidiary in France, in Chambray, just outside Lyon, where we've employed 5 people. We export to the UK, France, Denmark, Greece, Cyprus, Finland, and New Zealand. And we've been manufacturing and supplying, as I said, heating appliances and systems for over 40 years. We started in the late 1970s as a result of the energy crisis at that time. And this led to the development of our first product, which was the Grant Back boiler. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a video just of a history of the innovation and how the company has expanded over 40 years. So it's about 3 to 4 minutes long. So if I could ask Jean to start the video, please. So, and a lot to take in that video, but it is kind of a timeline over 40 years. So it's just to give you an idea and the flavor and the innovation and the pivoting that we've done from energy crisis through to what our customers demand, to markets, to legislation, to regulation. So you've seen a very wide range of products that we've introduced into the market over those 40 years. So I'd like to talk about how we've transitioned to be a renewable appliance manufacturer. And some of the key dates from that video is we started in 1978, as I said, which was a back boiler that burned solid fuel. And then in 1984, we launched the oil boiler range. And that is because the price of oil had started to fall. Back in 78, the price of oil was very expensive. And then people wanted the more convenience of, especially for rural off-grid gas heating, wanted the convenience of being able to turn it on, turn it off, and you buy a fill of oil that would last you the heating season. Then in 2006, this was the first range of renewables appliances, which was the launch of our solar thermal panels. Then in 2010, we launched our first heat pump. So our first heat pump, we are now selling our third generation heat pump. There's been 3 reiterations and we're working on our 4th generation currently at the moment. And then in 2011, we launched our first wood pellet boiler. This pellet boiler was actually a condensing pellet boiler and was the first condensing pellet boiler launched in Europe. In 2016, then we launched our first hybrid. So a hybrid basically was an integrated heat pump with an oil boiler. And then finally, in 2021, earlier this year, our R&D completed our final transition to all our appliances being renewable. And that's where all our oil boilers are now HVO biofuel compatible, HVO being hydrotreated vegetable oil. And this is one area that we see an opportunity with climate change for the residential heating market. So just to give you an idea, what is HVO? So HVO, as I said, is hydrotreated vegetable oil, and it's made from waste fats and used cooking oils. How is it made? It's made by hydrogen is added to either a plant or animal-based feedstock, which is an oil. It combines with oxygen, removing water from the mix, resulting in a renewable paraffinic fuel product. So what does this mean for carbon emissions? Well, by switching to 100% HVO, it will result in an 88% reduction in carbon compared to kerosene. So what does it mean for housing stock currently heated by kerosene? There are currently 680,000 homes currently heated by kerosene in the Republic of Ireland. So if they were all to run on 100% HVO, it would decarbonize these homes overnight by 88%. And then if it was obviously a blend, whether it was a 10% blend or 20% blend or 30% blend, similar to what you're seeing in the renewable fuel obligation for transport, you'd obviously have a transition to the point of where it becomes 100% HVO. The opportunity around this is actually the cost of upgrading existing oil boilers to HVO is cheap. It's approximately 500 euros. So by upgrading existing boilers, rather than having to replace the whole heating system and appliance with a heat pump, or for that matter, a wood pellet boiler, the costs of some of which can be used in further upgrading the building fabric to reduce the heat load even more. And even though we're a heating appliance and system company, we would always say to our customers, like your best bang for your buck is to continue to insulate and upgrade the fabric of your house, because no matter what you're heating your home, once you would continue to insulate, the cost of your heating will fall because the heating load will fall also as you're insulating, and it's the best return of money you can do. With HVO, this has a number of advantages. It will allow the grid more time to increase capacity, so it will be able to take on the deployment of heat pumps, in particular around new build and those retrofits that are going to be suitable for a heat pump. It will free up building trades to focus on new build rather than deep and costly retrofits. And then it will allow councils and housing associations to do more work to more houses with their existing budgets, in particular around the building fabric. So that's just an opportunity around what we see with HVO as a replacement for kerosene. Another opportunity obviously is heat pumps. And as you saw, we launched our first heat pump in 2010. And we see heat pumps are absolutely ideal for new build, and they can also be deployed for retrofit. But the one thing I would say about heat pumps, it is absolutely critical that an accurate room by room heat loss calculation is completed, and then a full heating design is completed. And then nothing can deviate from this design. And this is why they are so suited to a new build, because normally when a new build, when it goes to planning, there will be no changes. Or rarely. So that means that the builder and the tradesmen will actually build the house to their exact design. What you tend to see in retrofits is someone will make a decision to change something or move a radiator or not put in a radiator. And then that leads to a huge problem, because to get certification, it has to be signed off. And if it's not done to the design, then your heat loss calculation is incorrect. And that means your BER or your expected BER rating will be incorrect. So, and I hear this as the biggest complaint from our team here in Bord that does all the heating designs for heat pumps, that this is one of their major headaches is around retrofits. There are challenges around the heat pumps and the deployment of heat pumps. And again, as I said, retrofit can be more complicated depending on the age and the energy rating of the house, and it can be very costly and unaffordable to many. The running cost of a heat pump is underpinned by the cost of electricity. And Ireland, the last time I checked, has the second highest electricity costs in the EU. But we have seen in other markets where there has been a successful deployment of heat pumps and at scale. And the prime example is in France. But this was supported by very generous capital grants, tax incentives, and the fact that they have the cheapest electricity in the EU. So they overcame those challenges by, as I said, generous capital grants, tax incentives, and then obviously for the actual homeowner, they had the cheapest electricity in the EU. So it made it a very easy investment decision for them.
About 5 minutes there, Matt.
Perfect. The other opportunity we see is hybrids. And this is an interesting project that we're working with a research project with Northern Ireland Housing Executive. And we're trialing an existing oil boiler upgraded to a HVO with a heat pump, working with an electricity supplier providing demand management software. So the initial budget on this was 10,000 on fabric and 10,000 on the heating system. But obviously that budget is well blown now with the rate of inflation on building materials at the moment. But the idea is that the heat pump would do the majority of the work, 80%, 90% of the work. And then when in extreme cold weather, the HVO boiler can kick in. And obviously that's highly decarbonized as well. And then obviously with the electricity supplier providing demand management software, they can turn off the heat pump between peak hours of 4 and 8, and then automatically kick in the HVO if required. So that's an interesting project that we're working on. And we do see hybrids as being a very interesting opportunity as well with climate change. When we look at it from a business and purely from a business point of view, and we look at our customers, this is a very interesting graph that I would look at very regularly. And it compares, it's the annual cost of a 3-bedroom 2006 house, a house built in 2006 building regulations. And as if you look at the blue line, that's the cost of heating that house in September 2021. And the red line is compared to a 4-year average. So I'm just going to do, I know running out of time, I'm just going to pick out 2 or 3 things. The first one, if you look at peak briquettes, you can see the 4-year average is at 1521 euros, and you can now see it as 1,804. You can see where the carbon tax is kicking in. You can see where supply is now being minimized from Bord na Móna. But you can see it is probably the most expensive way to heat your home. I then go down to, and this is surprising for many people, if you look at the 5th line down, and it's electricity using an air source heat pump. And if you can see the 4-year average is running at about 1,000 to heat this house. And then if you look at September's, this year, September's, it's 1,200. So you've seen a dramatic increase in inflation as a direct result of increase of electricity prices. And I expect that to actually increase further, because a lot of the price increases that the energy companies have said will not take effect until the next coming 3 months, which is the heating season. And that could be up next December, that could be up around 1,400 euros to heat your house. And I suppose then the other surprising one is if you look at wood pellets, where the 4-year average has been running at 850 euros, and now it actually has fallen before below the 4-year average, and it's now 740 euros to heat your home, that particular home. And then obviously you can see where oil and gas is the cheapest, and they actually track each other very, very closely. But you can see that both for oil and I think oil is September is still below its 4-year average, and then natural gas is slightly ahead. But for us, this gives us an insight. Looking at the 4-year averages and the current is what the cost benefit investment decision is for the consumer or for the householder. And that has an impact for us looking at our strategy as well, because obviously it's the business side of what we do as well, and what consumer trends are, because much of policy and legislation and regulation will nudge or move the householder to a certain heating system. Cost that we would see, and the cost benefit investment decision is quite large in that decision process. So I'll finish there, and thank you, Jonathan.
Niall, thank you very much. All I can say is where were you 2 years ago when I needed this presentation, when I was changing out my boiler? And again, not to labour a point or to bore people, but we had a wood pellet boiler that we installed when we built the house in 2007. And that reached its natural end of its existence because the company, unfortunately, was no longer with us, so they couldn't get replacement parts, and we couldn't get anyone to install anything other than a boiler. Now, the good news is it's a Grant condenser boiler, so it's very efficient and very good at what it does, but I would love to have heard the options that you're bringing forward there. And it's just, there's so much that needs to be done to make everybody understand this, isn't there?
There is. It's complicated. It's not a simple decision, and it's hard for consumers because there's different information coming from different sources, and it's hard for the consumer. And obviously, regulation helps, and so does policy, and so does nudge economics to help behaviour and trying to select it. But look, the reality is, it's like the smoking ban. Decarbonisation has to happen, and it will happen. You know, how it happens and how it transitions, that's going to be probably the big unknown.
Well, first, you're telling me for 500 quid I can stop burning dead dinosaurs out in my garage if I put HVO into it? That's the question I have for you.
Well, that's it. Yeah, you know, like, it's a relatively new fuel. It's only in its infancy here in Ireland, but it's available. It's quite widely available in the UK, and in continental Europe, it's used in a lot of different industries. Like I know in Glastonbury, a lot of their generators are fueled by HVO. So it is, as the supply chain develops and putting HVO into the market, it is an option to decarbonise residential heating at a very, very affordable cost.
Yeah, and we know we can, as you say, nudge people in the right direction. Look, it's brilliant to hear about Grant Engineering, a fabulous journey that you and your family have been on, and keep it up, because it's great to see such an amazing Irish solution to something that isn't just an Irish problem. Niall Fahey, stay with us. There's questions after coming in, and we'll get them to you a little bit later on. But we are going from Burren, County Offaly, to, I believe, back to my native Cork. Darren Sherry is Director of Gaeltech Energy Services. You are in Cork now, rather than me making a show of myself.
I'm unfortunately in Cavan, Jonathan, and today I'm actually in Portugal.
Well, no, I tell you what, right? I mean, I couldn't have guessed that if I tried.
Cork's the right direction. Yeah, I'll give you that much.
Somewhere in between. And I presume it's very nice in Portugal, is it?
It's beautiful in Portugal, yeah, mid-20s, so it's really nice. So,
well, we'll stand here under our clouds as you share your presentation and take it away.
Absolutely. Thanks a million, Jonathan. Just an introduction to everyone for myself. First of all, I suppose I've been in the renewable industry for nearly 20 years. Delighted to speak here today and have a chat with you around where we see the future of renewable energy in particular going. And I'll start with a little introduction to Gaeltech, and from there we'll run on through to maybe a little bit of background to where we see the industry's at and where we see it going. So Gaeltech Group was founded back in 2000. It was a real kitchen table startup company. We've now grown to a stage where we're around 110 people. A lot of those people are sort of higher end people in the engineering space. We are a complicated little group. We've got a bunch of companies there. So I'll talk you through a little bit about why we have those companies. So we spread our companies across the phases of a project. So I suppose if we look at the development cycle on a typical renewable energy project, I'm thinking here about wind energy, but solar and a number of the other industries are very similar. You know, you've got a 10-year sort of development phase. In that 1 to 2 years, and then a 30 years operation phase. So our resources are spread across that period of time. So I've introduced you quickly to the divisions within the business. The original business that we had was in the development of wind energy, and that's still a really important business to us. So we've currently got about 680 megawatts of wind energy in development in Ireland. We've previously developed and now operate 300 megawatts of wind. We've got 300 megawatts of energy storage in development. And I suppose one of the themes for ourselves throughout the group is that we do like partnerships. So we very much like working, sorry, I'll go back there, working with a variety of key partners. And I suppose that's one of the messages I want to bring through the presentation today in regard to how we may see a future in some of the newer technologies that are coming through. So in the Irish market, our core development partners are General Electric and Storm. We have a development partnership with Energia also. And then on some of our operational projects, we work with Greencoat Capital. Moving on to our consulting division, Gaeltacht Energy Services. And I suppose in terms of chicken and egg and maybe how we talk about it later, the reason that we have a consulting business is simply because when we started in wind energy, we found that all of the experts that we needed to develop our projects, to help us to do the expert studies, we needed to import them from continental Europe, from the UK, etc. So over the last 20 years, we've built up a team of really strong experts around their fields, be that acoustics, environmental, due diligence is now becoming one of our largest pieces of work that we do there. So it is really a case, if there wasn't development happening, there wouldn't be a consulting business. And that's something we want to talk about later on again. In an equal light, we have a measurement services business. And I know Catherine touched on this earlier with regard to the need for precision measurements around renewable energy projects, because of course the technologies are quite new. Met Éireann has been looking at our solar resource, our wind resource, our other climatic resources over the period of time, but those haven't been site specific. So what we're doing is taking specific measurements on specific sites and then correlating them to the long-term resources that we're getting from Met Éireann and from a variety of other sources. One of our most recent companies that's really grown very quickly is a company called Energy Pro that's based in Athy in County Kildare. That business is a joint venture with Sheila Layden, one of the pioneers in the wind industry. It's now the #1 asset manager in Ireland in terms of wind and renewable energy. It's only set up about 5 years now, and it's one of those businesses, again, if the projects weren't built, that business wouldn't be there. Moving forward and looking to the future, we have two businesses. One is called Optinergy, which is an Irish-based business. The other is 360 Renewables, which is a UK business. And that's looking to the future, looking to operating, physically maintaining turbines when they've been built. The business is already very well established and has almost 200 turbines under operation at this point in time. But if you remember my graph earlier, if we look at the development cycle of wind energy and solar, you have a 10-year lead-in period of development followed by 30 years plus lifetime of operations. And these businesses are very much looking at that 30-year period. So in terms of quality jobs and regional jobs, that's one of the areas where there are a lot of opportunities in the regions to support the operations and maintenance. And this is work that would otherwise go to, the turbine manufacturers like Siemens and GE, which are sort of international conglomerates. We also have a business called Gaeltacht Energy Contracts, which is looking at balance of plant work. It's probably more boring for today's presentation. And our most recent business, and one I'll just touch on today, is Gaeltacht Sustainable Living. So we are primarily a renewable energy business, and that's been what we've been at for the last 20 years, but we see an opportunity around sustainable housing. And we see that opportunity in the manufacture of volumetric housing offsite using modern methods of construction. So what that means are building good quality housing in a factory environment. And I suppose the motivation to do that, and the motivation why we see the opportunity around that, is we see if we're going to deliver our Housing for All plan and the plans that will come after that, we need to severely increase our capacity to build houses. We need to do that in a quality manner. And I suppose the financing structures and also the contractual structures that are around that sort of delivery of scale of housing are very, very similar to what we're seeing in the renewable energy space. So that's something we'll talk about again further on a later date. So to show you a little graph of where we've in Ireland. So I'm not going to go into individual project and say we've sort of worked all over the country. Large focus on the Midlands, where we see a lot of future opportunities and something that keeps growing all the time. Outside of Ireland, we worked in a variety of wild and wonderful locations overseas. We've worked in Africa quite a bit. We worked in the CIS region, and as you can see, in a variety of other places. So I suppose to introduce everyone to sort of the state of the nation, where is renewable energy at right now before we look at maybe where it's going. So onshore wind in Ireland right now, we've got 360 wind farms. We've got just over 5,000 megawatts installed, capacity, 4,400 people employed, roughly equates to 3.3 million homes powered annually. So that's taking into account sort of average energy production, average energy consumption. We're seeing that. Roughly, we're contributing about 2.5 million of community funding, which is direct funding from the projects to the neighbouring communities, and 45 million euros of local authority rates at present. If we look out to 2030, and again, if you consider the development pipeline for renewable energy projects is 10 years out, so a lot of the projects that we're talking about here, the die has been cast, that the projects are in development. We expect to see 8,000 plus megawatts installed, 7,000 people employed in the industry, 5 million homes powered, which is more than we've actually got in Ireland. The community fund, there's been a change to how the industry deals with community funds. It's been increased through the recent RES scheme. So we're expecting to see a multiple of community funds from 2.5 million currently to 22.5 million by that point in time. Local authority rates in respect of wind energy has also changed recently. It's been re-rated and it's in the process of being re-rated. So by 2030, we would expect to see 100 million plus of local authority rates from onshore wind alone. Just to put that in context, it wouldn't be far off 10% of the overall local authority budget for the entire country. And when combined with solar and with some other things, I think we'll push over that. In terms of offshore wind, that's been talked about earlier today a little bit. That's something that's really just starting to move in Ireland at this point in time. So right now we've only got one wind farm, the Arklow Bank, which is a prototype project, 25 megawatts, but a huge pipeline developing at this point in time. So if we combine all the projects that are in planning at this point in time or have been notified, there's about 22,000 megawatts in the pipeline. So we look out to 2030, we would expect to see 18 wind farms built by 2030. That's based again on information that projects that have sort of been out there at this point in time. We would like to have seen 5,000 megawatts installed with an established infrastructure and with extensive interconnection. And that's something we're going to come back to later in the presentation. In terms of solar, solar has been working in Ireland to date principally behind the meter. And by behind the meter, I mean the rooftops, in industrial buildings, in private infrastructure where people have installed solar panels. We reckon there's around 60 megawatts installed at this point in time. By the end of 2021, we'll expect there'll be 4 actual solar parks in the Republic of Ireland with about 200 megawatts installed. And coming behind that, there's about a 3,000 megawatt pipeline coming behind that. Right now, pretty much everything associated with solar is being imported from abroad. If we look to 2030, we expect to see quite a few wind farms built. We expect to see the behind the meter rooftop substantially increased. We would be hopeful that there may be a feed-in tariff allowed for people to feed their electricity back into the grid, be that at a residential level, but also at an industrial level. I think if that happens, that will provide a substantial opportunity, particularly for warehousing and areas where they may not need that much power at this point in time, but there are large roof spaces available where you could actually see a lot of solar being produced on top of buildings. We just expect to see about 4,000 megawatts of utility scale projects installed at that point in time. And we need to see an established operations and maintenance base. We can't see that being imported from abroad. So I think that's one of the areas where the industry is going to need to focus over the next few years to develop an O&M base. If we talk briefly about solar, or about storage rather, storage, I suppose, is something that's very much in transition at this point in time. So we've seen 245 megawatts installed to date. 200 of those 245 megawatts have been installed earlier this year. And the vast majority of the 245 are providing what are known as system services. So providing system services would be frequent
Oops,
But
I'd
we think
say-
we're going to see a transition. Oh,
Sorry, Darren, there was just a glitch on your line there. If you want to just pick up on that point again there, because you just disappeared for a second or two.
apologies, guys. I was saying in respect of energy storage, we are seeing we see a lot of potential future in energy storage. There's currently 245 megawatts installed. That 245 megawatts, 200 of the 245 has been installed earlier this year. And nearly all of that 245 megawatts is supporting frequency control, general, what are known as DS3 services on the system, so stabilizing the grid. But we're not doing energy arbitrage. And by that, I mean, when there are periods of, for example, high wind or cheap electricity, we're not filling the batteries and then discharging them during shortage of electricity. So we see over the next 10 years, an opportunity to develop that sort of project where we actually would charge batteries during periods of high wind or low energy price, and then discharge those during periods of low wind and low energy price. And right now, the incentives aren't there to do that. The technology is still a little bit more expensive. But as you can see, we've got 2,290 megawatts in development. So the industry really believes, including Gaeltech, that we will get there quite soon. I'll move on to hydrogen. I think that's been very comprehensively covered by Catherine earlier. The one open question for us all is, hydrogen has been the next big thing for the last 30 years. And we've spent the last 30 years saying very soon we're going to see hydrogen becoming a key fuel source. It seems more real this time. Gaeltech believes it's real. We know the industry out there believes it's real. We think that the price of carbon mixed with our need to transition from traditional fuels really helps this transition to hydrogen happen over time. I suppose to put it in monetary context, green hydrogen is currently trading in around 8 euros per kilo. We've seen some projects in Germany where it's been sold to consumers for 9.99 a kilo. I think if we're going to develop large industrial users of hydrogen, we need to be getting towards 2 euros per kilo over time. So that's going to be done by reducing, so larger, for example, offshore projects where power can be produced really cheaply, but also the electrolysis process needs to also get cheaper. And I think that the industry around that has acknowledged that and is working to potentially getting halfway there through the technology. And I think the industry then needs to bring it the other halfway through relatively cost-effective electricity. But just to put it in context,
5 minutes left there now, Darren, I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Jonathan. So I suppose moving on to the opportunities that we see around renewable energy and renewable energy in the regions and in Ireland. I suppose in a do-nothing scenario where renewable energy projects are developed in the regions, 20% of the spend will be local. So that's civil works, that's accommodation, sort of works that can't be avoided in any way. So that means that up to 80% of the spend, of the CapEx spend on the project, is available up for grabs. Now, not all of that is going to be available. If we look at the various industry papers that would indicate that we should be really aiming as a country to capture 40% of spend, with the other 60 coming from imported turbines or solar panels or whatever the case may be. In order to do that, I suppose let's talk through the different pieces of the industry and where we might see something happen. So in terms of onshore wind, my personal belief is that operations and maintenance is one of the core areas where we're going to see a lot of local employment in Ireland, something that really can help the regions. In terms of local authorities, there aren't very much that the local authorities can do, bar keep it in mind when you're looking at projects, when you're designing projects, when you're figuring out what's happening. Retrofitting, I think this is an area where, particularly if we look towards maybe hybridization of projects, we see a lot of opportunity to integrate solar and storage together with existing wind farms with existing solar, etc. And I think that's an area where local authorities can really get involved in. In terms of community fund, just to highlight that we're moving from a position where there's going to be currently 2.5 million per annum of community funds being distributed, moving towards 20 million plus of community funds. I think from a good governance perspective, local authorities really should be part of that process and should be part of the fabric of how that money is spent and how it's sort of I think this point is around the whole area of assembly and construction ports. So right now, there are no ports in the Republic of Ireland where we can actually build offshore projects from. Harland and Wolff in Belfast is the nearest thing to something we have, or the UK. So unless Ireland takes immediate action in respect of developing out ports, we aren't going to see the level of investment from offshore that we really should be seeing. In terms of operations and maintenance ports, I think we've already seen Arklow announced by SSE as a core port for operations and maintenance over time. We're going to see Foynes and other areas also doing this. So I think that's one of the areas where smaller ports can find opportunities as well. In terms of offshore wind versus onshore wind, there is a huge balance of plant associated with offshore wind in terms of the foundations or the floating systems that are going to be used. So there's a huge opportunity for engineering businesses. Again, large components, they're going to need to be transported, ideally built in or around ports, but there are huge opportunities there. Obviously, one of the areas which Catherine touched on earlier, there's a lot of opportunity for marine specialists, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity for training of specialists. We don't have the stock in Ireland of specialists that we need to bring us towards that future. In terms of solar, it's very similar to onshore wind. I think we need to just capture that next chunk of revenue that Ireland hasn't been capturing to date. A large chunk of those jobs are in high-end jobs where you're obviously, be it engineers maintaining the turbines or solar panels. However, there is a simple, hygiene and cleaning. Solar panels need to be cleaned regularly. So there are also low-end jobs available in that space as well. Within energy storage, this is a huge area together with hydrogen, which we're going to see a lot of development. So, that's going to go anything from the embedded storage within buildings and vehicles, obviously the electrification of transport, obviously the grid scale arbitrage, as we talked about before. We really see an opportunity around hybridization of projects. So utilizing the same grid connection that's already there for a wind farm to also introduce solar and also storage. And we see that as a huge opportunity. One of the other opportunities for storage, and something again local authorities may see, is in the area of EV charging stations. If you're going to see fast charger, large numbers of fast chargers together, you're going to need a substantial connection to the grid. By introducing energy storage at those points, you can stabilize the amount of power you need at any one point in time from the grid. And that's something we see an opportunity for equally. So just closing out on hydrogen, the opportunities there, obviously, the core opportunity we see, and Catherine touched on this point earlier, is in the greening of dirty industries. So there are industries where just simple electricity doesn't work to move them away from hydrocarbons. So we see the opportunity in the chemical and steel industries to really help them to transition to a greener future. The other area, and the topical one that's there at the moment, we see a huge opportunity to use hydrogen as a backup power for data centers. There's a CRU decision due in the next couple of days, and we would expect to see some sort of incentive within that for data centers to have their own backup power on site and to work together. And again, to echo Catherine's point, I think hydrogen presents a huge export potential for Ireland. And I think this is something we're already seeing when we speak to our colleagues in continental Europe. They're really looking at how they can generate hydrogen in Germany and in Denmark and in Netherlands, and they don't simply have the renewable energy resource to do it there. So we see huge potential for Ireland to export this in wholesale quantities. And obviously transport fuel is the other use for hydrogen, which I think Ireland will be a part of, but I think the international industry will actually lead how technology is moving towards that. So Jonathan, back over to you. That's me finished.
Brilliant, Darren. Thank you very much indeed. And thanks to all the speakers, in fact, who've been really good on time. I know I've been breathing down your neck, but it is for good reasons, so we can keep on time. And it's good to hear, Darren, your overview there from Gaeltech Energy Services. So we're going to ask all of our speakers to turn their cameras and their microphones back on. We should have everybody. So we're welcoming back Marie Donnelly, Chair of the Climate Change Advisory Council, Andy Johnson from the Local Government Information Unit, Mark Crystal from Enterprise Ireland, Pádraig McElwee from Leo, Catherine Sheridan from Green Rebel and EIH2, Niall Fay of Grant Engineering, and Darren is still with us. So we are respectively saying hello to London, Dublin, Clare, Eastkey, Birr, and Portugal via Cavan. So I think that's everybody who is with us now on screen. And we're going to go through some of the questions that have come in for you. Iski has moved to the back of the car. I can see from that there. So we're still hoping that the Wi-Fi will hold up outside the Centra. I'm going to go to you, Mary Donnelly, first of all, because lots of questions have come in for you. The first of which is, where would you encourage green and social procurement in the rollout of climate action?
Well, that's a very good question, I have to say, and I think it's particularly relevant in the light of the presentations that we've had so far during the conference. Green procurement, for me, should be an intrinsic part of any procurement. So I think the first port of call has to be government procurement. It has to be intrinsic into that because the government spends a lot of money. And it has to allow green procurement in other sectors. I'm thinking, for example, if a school wants to put solar panels on its roof and generate power and either use it itself or sell it to the bill, they have to be allowed to procure those and to use them on their facility. So for me, procurement is a very important public tool. Just as an illustration, and it varies, of course, by member states, but 1/3 of purchases in Europe come from public procurement. It is an enormous market. So the power of public procurement is huge. And yes, we need to make sure that it is greened and that it is operated as a green purchasing instrument.
Okay, next question for you. How do you envisage addressing the converging housing, energy and labour issues/crises through a systemic approach to sustainable development? Now, that's a very simple and straightforward question, which I'm presuming you have a very easy answer for.
Well, Ireland, first of all, we've set ourselves very ambitious targets in terms of decarbonisation and moving to net zero by 2050, and with a target for 2030 as well of 51% reduction. And I don't want to underplay that level of ambition. It is really, really ambitious, and it is not going to be easy. However, we are nonetheless in a very fortunate position, and Darren actually pointed to this a minute ago. We're moving from a fossil fuel-based economy and society into a sustainable one. And unlike back when the Industrial Revolution happened and it was all based on coal and steel or whatever, that passed us by. But this revolution, it's ours. We have the resource. We have the natural resource, both in terms of wind and in terms of solar, in terms of hydro onshore and in terms of marine offshore. We have the resource. And even better than that, we have the, shall we say, human capital capacity to use that. We are going to be constrained, not by money. Money is always an issue, but in the end of the day, money will flow to where demand and return is. Our biggest single issue is human capacity. Have we enough people to actually deliver on the tasks? And we will be challenged with that, and there are a number of ways to do it. Obviously, for those who are not fully active in the labour market, maybe they can be attracted in. We need to upskill people in the labour market, that's for sure. I'm not going to go down the route of whether we do or we don't open to migration. That's a very political question. But I think the other area that we really have to use is technology. Let's be smart about how we use this. If a machine can do it and sometimes do it better, let's get the machine to do it. And this starts with construction. And I don't mean this as a negative comment to the construction industry, but we're still building houses today like we did 400 years ago. Is there a new technology that we could be using? Is there a new way we can do it? Can we, industrialize, if I could say, commercial construction?
It's the steeplejack argument that at one stage in humanity we needed lots of steeplejacks. Then something happened in an industrial transition where we didn't need as many steeplejacks anymore. Yet people retrained who were once steeplejacks to do other things. And on construction, I agree with you wholeheartedly. One more, if I can, before we go. Given your international and local experience, no pressure, what needs to be done to fully embed understanding climate and the benefits arising into the wider population? And how can local government, because that's the audience we're talking to today, how can local government be seen to lead it?
Okay, what's the first mechanism is know your number. We're all talking about electricity now. 3 months ago, nobody talked about electricity. And we're only talking about it now because the prices are going up. But I would still challenge, and I thought, Niall, your presentation was that I would challenge most people listening today to tell me how many kilowatt hours of energy they use to heat their home. Because they pay by the kilowatt hour. And how many people actually. So my first really strong recommendation is know your own number, and then you can start dealing with things. And the second issue, and I think where local government can really play a big part, is going back to your first question on public procurement. I think public procurement of some of the technologies that people will use, in terms of the retrofits, in terms of purchasing, let's say, heat pumps. Bulk purchase of heat pumps will be able to supply them to people at a discounted rate. It's the Aldi, it's the Lidl approach. This is where the public, local authorities, I believe, can play a role in supporting people, not just financially, which is important, but also people locally trust you. And when you put together a package and you offer a discounted price, let's say on, you buy 100 heat pumps and people can purchase it then from you at the lower price, they trust you. So I think that's also very important. It's the financial side, but it's also the trust in you as a trusted partner.
Okay, Barry Donnelly, thank you very much for that. A fair play to Niall Fay, the mention of bulk purchase of heat pumps. He didn't even break a smile, which is the kind of thing you'd think a fellow who makes heat pumps would do. But no, he's smiling now, which is good. He's still listening. Okay, we're going to go to Andy next. Andy, one of our viewers has asked this question. I'd be interested to hear more on how the international experience compares to Ireland on biodiversity and why you say Ireland's experience is comprehensive and unique. The question is set in the context that biodiversity is still emerging as an area of local government as an ambition of the last two national biodiversity action plans. We're a little bit late to the party, I suppose, is a better way of describing it.
Possibly. I mean, in terms of the research that we carried out, we didn't find strategic frameworks in other countries which brought biodiversity and climate change together as part of single strategies for local authorities. What we tended to find was the local authorities would have a climate change remit of some sort, and there would be a government agency of working alongside them, bringing the biodiversity piece into play. And so it wasn't particularly joined up. So first point is, in terms of the strategic framework, we didn't find other countries which included biodiversity in the climate change remit, as it were. Where we did find examples where that happened anyway, because obviously some local authorities do, of their own volition, just bring biodiversity considerations in. Where we found it was around the tourism piece, and in particular in New Zealand. In New Zealand, they're talking about regenerative tourism as being the next step for them. So this is not just, create a lovely place and they will come. This is the fact that people go somewhere actually makes the place better as well. So you have things like local sales taxes, which are all hypothecated to be given over to biodiversity and park initiatives, things like that. Or you specifically encourage the volunteering tourist to come along and help improve the wildlife in a particular area. So it does happen. It's quite niche. And there needs to be more of it, but at the moment, Ireland is the only place we found which actually includes it in the strategy.
Okay, that's good. Well, that's a mark on the positive side of the column for us. Another question, how much of the Copenhagen district heating that you highlighted on one of your slides is supplied from renewable energy, and how much from household waste, that which we tend to want to ship abroad, to be quite honest, particularly out of the part of the country I'm in?
Right. I checked on this. It's 60% currently, 60% in 2019 of Copenhagen's district heating is renewable sourced. There's questions about how you actually define renewables as a fuel, which it can be quite complex. But they're working up. So it's not amazing, but it's not bad.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for that. By the way, all the slides you will get, thanks to everybody who took time and effort to put the proposals together. I want to go to, where am I going to go to next? I'm going to go to you, Mark, because you were next as a speaker. Question for you. What practical examples have you of funding at local level that's bringing tangible employment to rural areas in Ireland? I mean, Enterprise Ireland has lots of companies in lots of parts of the country, hasn't it? That are just growing like little mushrooms.
Absolutely, and so of there's 220,000 people employed in our client companies. As I said earlier, about 2/3 of those people are employed in regional locations. So and many in small enterprises, which are so important to our regions. And I think what we see and what we know is that there are loads of examples of companies that are growing and have the potential to grow and to play a really important part in this agenda. And it goes back to what Mary and people have said throughout the day. It is about innovation. There's no question. It's about encouraging within those companies and about facilitating, encouraging new startups. It's about skills. And the people capability is so important in terms of our clients, and we know that there's that constant war for talent, and it is like areas like funding and the ability to develop new products and sell them in markets is obviously a really important components as well. But I think what we do know from an EI perspective is we have a really strong, incredibly strong cohort of Indigenous companies that are capable of making the transition. And I suppose what we're sort of saying is, we're starting on the journey. The key message we're trying to get across is this is about, and I think it's been well documented and well said by other speakers today. It's about the future of enterprise. It's about being competitive into the future, and it's about, from our point of view, starting companies in every region in Ireland across every sector on that journey. That's really the key focus for us at the moment.
Yeah, and that to me is that geographical spread idea. We've never had it, and Mary, you mentioned this as well. We've never had a better opportunity to spread this around the country than we have with this. So let's just seize that opportunity. One more for you, Mark Crystal. The land use sector is not well understood in terms of recarbonising land use and biodiversity, in contrast to decarbonising energy and transport. Are Enterprise Ireland aware of and are supporting developments between European and global carbon market development and the role that activity in this space can play in landscape scale restoration and innovation towards carbon neutrality? I mean, they're really good at this in the Midlands, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And probably the honest answer is we've a lot to learn around this and new opportunities that might exist. So something probably for me to follow up on in truth. But what I would say is, again, I think this is going to take agencies like ourselves into new spaces and working in areas we might not have looked at in the past. And it's also going to mean new collaborations. And again, I think there's a hugely important role for local government in this area. But I think we're developing and will need to develop new relationships with the likes of the EPA, Sustainable Energy Ireland, indeed our sister agencies like Bord Bia, the LEOs, and IDA Ireland as well. So I think that the need for joined up thinking and exploring new areas and new opportunities that traditionally we might not have been focused on is something that definitely is that this journey is going to bring us into. So yeah, something for us to follow up on there.
Okay, Pádraig McElwee, if I could turn to you, Chair of the Local Enterprise Office. That same question actually that came in that I asked Mark about the practical examples of projects funded at local level. I mean, that's what the LEO is all about, isn't it? Making sure that small businesses get off the ground, get the support they need. And if they start in a green space, they're more likely to progress right now, aren't they?
Yeah, and Jonathan, what we're seeing on the ground is a lot of, particularly the smaller engineering companies, investing in improved machine equipment that is more energy efficient. It improves their business, it improves their throughput, but it also reduces their energy costs. And in a way, COVID has forced them to step back and look at that and look at their cost base. So that's one practical example. The other example we see is on the research and development. A lot of companies are starting to explore different materials. So maybe around packaging, how they preserve, particularly in the food product. Some of them are trialing different options. Now, not all of it will work, but that's what research is about. Research is about looking at it, exploring it, and say, right, what progress can we make? So, like I think in Clare alone, we funded 3 projects over the last 12 months that are really looking at the material used in the day-to-day running of the business, and is there alternative options for them?
Okay, another question for you. Green for Micro, I think that's the name of the program. It's a great leg up for SMEs on their sustainability journey. However, at EcoMerit, obviously this is coming in for someone in EcoMerit, good afternoon, we have seen the best results are achieved through continual engagement and support, with environmental performance being measured and monitored. Are there any supports for SMEs that want to continue to track and monitor the environmental performance over time, going beyond the 2-day Green for Micro? So that's a very good question, isn't it? Because there's no point in giving you, there you go, you know how to do it now, off with you, and not coming back later and checking it. Continuous personal development is very important, Pádraig.
Yeah, and that's, I alluded to that in my presentation. 3 of my colleagues are actually running pilot programs around what is the follow-up support and how that might look, and does it encourage for people to adapt the practice that we want them to do. So the Green for Micro, when we launched it back in March, was set up as a pilot program. Those reports are coming in, and that will now be reviewed to see what are the follow-up steps. But I think 100%, it's well and good going in telling a small business, here's 10 things you can do or 7 things you can do. We will need to support them to do what we recommend they do. How that looks and what it looks like and how we facilitate that, that's something we have to work on. And I'm sure Mark and his team in Enterprise Ireland, given their experience at the larger end, they'll be very much able to help us on that journey to what we do next.
Okay, very good. Catherine Sheridan, I have the first question. Were you thrown out of the Centra, or what happened there?
Well, you know, the energy sector is moving so quickly that we actually wanted to go to a site to look at where we could potentially invest. So that we don't have time to wait, Jonathan.
Straight out. Well, that's I'm glad to hear. I'm glad to hear. So many questions have come in. We get to go on before you go.
Before you go, just I wanted to touch on some of those points about the jobs that are coming up and how exciting it is. I know that the Maritime College in Cork, they're looking at ways of equipping people with you know, experience and life experience, so maybe people with trades who have that practical experience to get the catch up that they need. So they're the sort of jobs and that's the sort of way that people are being equipped. When Minister Eamon Ryan was talking recently, he said that one of the most exciting parts about the energy transition is that it's going to give people who maybe aren't your lawyers, doctors or engineers a route to having really exciting future jobs. And my son was listening to it in the car and he's hoping to be a tradesperson. So, you know, I think when we think about the opportunities that are there in the job sector, it's not just at one level of what we're doing, it's across all levels.
Okay, and that's another great way of explaining that to people who might want to get on board this journey. Catherine, couple of questions have come in for you. I was just wondering to somebody, is there any safety concerns around the hydrogen storage, or what risk mitigation steps can be taken? Because again, this is a fuel source and people always get, yes, it's green and it's produced from water, and that's fine. We understand the electricity and the water part, but hydrogen storage, people's brains go to strange places. So what is happening in terms of where it is being stored and how safe it is?
Yeah, so the great thing about hydrogen is it's something that's been used for decades now. So as an energy source, we really understand it, and we've developed a lot of the regulations and safety protocols around it. So it's been stored and used as it is. The difference is we're just generating it in a different way, and it's going to be used in a way that has less emissions, less impact on the environment. I think when we think about fuels, we always have to consider them relative to each other. I mean, if we were coming up with fuels nowadays, I don't think we'd ever come up with petrol and diesel being in forecourts around the countryside. So what we need to do is we need to understand our fuel sources, we need to develop them safely, and we need to work with communities and local authorities to make sure that they're being placed in locations that are really going to benefit. I mean, you know, if we want to have a hydrogen production facility near somewhere that could produce airplane fuels, that's a really good location for that to be had. And we need to really understand and work with councils to get that right.
Okay, this one, a little bit technical. Without the need for grid connections, hydrolysis, SMMS, to be a silver bullet for decarbonisation. I don't know what that is, you might explain that to me, but also someone is saying they're concerned about the compressibility of hydrogen and conversion efficiencies versus capex of the hydrolyzer. I have no idea what those words mean. Please explain.
Yeah, okay. So like as an engineer, my nerd lights go out and I'm like, oh, great, I'd love to have a conversation about this. But I think for the general audience, okay, so again, hydrogen is something that we know and understand how to use. It's a little bit different than other gases, but we still have the understanding.
Earnings that are happening on a national level. What we're looking at the moment is working with different people like Gas Networks Ireland, who have a hydrogen innovation centre set up at Brown's Barn, and they're looking at how can hydrogen be used in the existing network and things that we have. So that's kind of one of the levels of understanding that we have. When it comes to the economics, it's really good to think back to onshore wind, and people were saying it'll never be affordable, we'll never get there. Well, thanks be to God, we started when we did and did what we could to get to where we are now. And that's exactly what's going to happen with hydrogen. We've got to be brave. The solutions are there for us as a country, and we've got to be brave and we've got to take them. And we've got to understand that if we collaborate and work together, we can work on the economics, we can work on the supply, we can work with the offshore wind developers to come up with an overall integrated solution for Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, explain to the guy who once had a horse that his next mode of transport was going to be something that was containing a tank of explosive fuel that could blow up at any moment. He probably would have stuck with the horse. So, you know, we have to work out that there are technological solutions as we go along. Niall, I want to go to you next. The funny thing is, I do media training with people. I always say, you know, people are going to hear certain things. So they're going to remember certain things, no matter what you're trying to communicate. Most of the questions related to HVO, which was something that I didn't really understand until you told me about it. But some of the questions that have come in are, how readily available is HVO? How much is it going to be per litre? How does HVO compare to the calorific value or energy capacity of kerosene? And are there HVO suppliers such as Beveridge Domestic Homes in Dublin specifically, which is presumably somebody saying, could I please get a delivery of HVO? Talk a bit more about HVO now.
Okay, HVO is really, in Ireland, is at its infancy. To my knowledge, I'm not an expert in upstream and downstream refining and distribution of fuels, but to my knowledge, Irving Fuel and Inverfuel have HVO. Whether it's just for commercial at the moment, I don't know whether they do residential deliveries at the moment. I know McNichol's Fuel in the north do have it as well, but again, I think they're mainly a commercial at the moment. So the residential one at the moment, I do know it's not readily available at this point in time. That supply chain has to develop. The cost, again, I'm not 100% sure because it's in its infancy. It is more expensive than kerosene. There is, without a doubt. I know that. I can't give you an exact figure of how much.
But I'm presuming that that's market driven as well. If there's not enough of it around, it's going to remain at higher level. If they produce more of it, it comes down.
Yeah.
And does it burn as well as kerosene?
That's the key point. And this is the beauty of it. We spent a lot of we've done a lot of research around using various different biofuels. So one of the ones that we started out and with our R&D program was a biofuel called FAME, F-A-M-E. I won't tell you what the acronym is for. It's a big, long scientific name, but it's called FAME. And we managed to get the boilers to use up to a 30% blend very successfully. But there's esters, that's what the E stands in FAME, and they actually have very poor cold starting capability. So it had issues for us, and we said it was never going to be a solution if we wanted to move to a biofuel. Where HVO comes into its own is that it is a paraffinific fuel. So does it have the exact same joules per energy density as kerosene? I'm not sure. Again, it's very technical, but from my understanding is it's not far off it, if not equivalent.
It's good stuff, but there's just not enough of it around at the moment. Next question. Do you think wood pellet boilers will be phased out due to our aversion of using wood for fuel? Again, going back to my own experience, we were told we were mad when we put one in. It worked out really, really well. The problem was there was no one left to service the boiler, which went to reached end of life. Are we moving away from it and perhaps moving more towards HVO, heat pump, and the wood pellet boiler will become a thing of the past?
No, I think wood pellets will be there as long as, and again, this will depend where policy goes, and if they decide that they're not totally zero carbon, or they're partially near zero or whatever. But no, wood pellet, I'd be very agnostic as to residential heating, as to what technology goes in. I think it has to be right for the owner. There has to be affordable to a certain level. I think it has to be obviously readily available. You need to have your whole engineer's background for servicing and technical support and parts. So there's that whole element there as well. It's kind of sometimes forgotten about, but you know, like the heat pump market is very well developed here in Ireland. The wood pellet market is very well developed here. We've our own domestic suppliers. I'm thinking of Leinster Pellets, D Pellets, Balcas. So we have a huge domestic supply chain there. We've plenty of forestry as well. We're going to be building lots of new houses, so all the timber mills will have plenty of sawdusts, which is the prime part and product of wood pellet. So no, and then you saw there from the slide there that it's been a relatively stable fuel as regards to a cost, and it's actually fell below its 4-year average there as well. I see it certainly in the Midlands as well, where people are wondering, well, am I going to burn briquettes, or I'm going to burn turf? I can't do it anymore. I'm going to continue to burn timber. And a lot of people are looking at pellets as an alternative to other solid fuels as well. So no, I can't see any. It'll suit some people like everything else, and it'll suit others.
Yeah, it's just one of a suite of solutions that's out there. It's not, there's not one size fits all, and perhaps that arguably is the mistake we made in the past.
Yeah,
that we decided, well, let's just keep burning oil and diesel because that's what's readily available. Darren, question for you here: what sort of jobs fall under the category of marine specialists? I'm not sure. I'm sorry, Darren.
Every single job falls under.
For a second, carry on.
Apologies. I was saying that ultimately every job will fall under the marine specialist to some degree, and by that I mean every job that is currently an onshore wind, be that from environmental specialists to planning people. Everyone will need marine training in the first instance because they're suddenly going to start working offshore. The other thing I'd say is, as we sit in the onshore wind space, everybody, there is a shortage of people already in the onshore wind space. So every single person that's going to be employed offshore will need to either move from onshore to offshore and have their job replaced onshore, or alternatively, we're going to need to see, absolute import of the skills to build the early projects. So every single job is a marine specialist. If we look at the very specialist marine roles, it's really going to be around marine safety. It's going to be around access. It's going to be around, obviously, the environmental impact of building these projects offshore. So there are going to be specialists in that space. But again, I know we don't have enough people in this space. So everybody's going to need to be trained or imported. So in my opinion, training is much better than importation.
And just because we're talking to local authorities here, and another thing that's a challenge for local authorities, they don't create jobs, but like government, they can help make sure that the environment is there for job creation. The jobs we're talking about, again, just to hammer home a point, are everywhere. And if you're talking about marine, look at all those coastal towns around that for years have been saying there is no employment opportunity. There's nothing new coming in here. There's nothing stopping those kind of jobs being created in those towns.
Absolutely, and again, access opportunities for existing, there's smaller ports can provide access for operations and maintenance. The larger ports are needed to allow construction. Construction is very heavy industrial production, so there are both low-level jobs and also the higher-level jobs offshore. But the jobs are everywhere, and as we said, even if onshore wind jobs move to offshore, those jobs will need to be replaced in the regions as well. So you will see a raft of new people moving around in the industry as well.
Absolutely brilliant point to finish up on the opportunity that exists. Darren Sherry of Gale Tech Services, Niall Fay from Grant Engineering, Catherine Sheridan from Green Rebel, Pádraig McElwee from the Local Enterprise Office Network, Mark Crisler from Enterprise Ireland, Andy Johnson from Local Government Information Unit, and Mary Donnelly, Chair of the Climate Change Advisory Council. Thank you all so much for joining us. Before you go, we have to do an awkward wave. I forgot to do an awkward wave with the panel yesterday. You have to wave at everybody to say goodbye. There we go. That's the awkward wave out of the way. Love doing that. It makes people feel tremendously uncomfortable just as they finish up. And thank you to everybody. And thank you, more importantly, for sending in your questions and for your diligence throughout the last 2 days. It gives me pleasure now to hand over to our penultimate speaker. The last person we will hear from will be Anna-Marie Delaney, who I will ask to close out the conference. But for now, I would like to hand over for his closing address to the Minister for the Environment, Climate and Communications, Eamon Ryan, TD.
Hello. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge Anna-Marie Delaney, Chief Executive of Offaly County Council, for overseeing the organisation of this event. I would also like to acknowledge the work of CCMA and the Climate Action Regional Offices in pursuing research into this important subject matter to help promote it within local authorities. 2021 has been a momentous year for climate action. Last month saw the launch of the UN IPCC's flagship report on the science of climate change, which confirmed for the first time that human actions have unequivocally warmed the atmosphere, ocean and land. It also stated that urgent action was required to mitigate the negative impacts of climate change. Government policy has been very active in responding to this challenge. In July, we passed the Climate Action and Low Carbon Development Amendment Act 2021, which commits us to reach a legally binding target of net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest, and a cut of 51% by 2030 compared to 2018 levels. This Act provides the framework for Ireland to meet its international and EU climate commitments and to become a leader in addressing climate change. In the coming weeks, we will also publish the Climate Action Plan 2021, which will detail the additional measures and policies that we've put in place in every sector to bring about the significant changes needed so we can transform our society and achieve these ambitious climate targets. It will set out actions that must be taken in every government department and body in order to ensure we deliver on the commitments in the programme for government, including make sure we achieve those 2030 and 2050 climate targets. Our immediate target of halving emissions in the next decade is challenging, but it's also an opportunity for enterprises to help transform our economy, to create new jobs, to protect our local environment, and to build a greener and fairer future for all. Building sustainable, low-carbon businesses is becoming increasingly imperative from both a social and environmental perspective, but also from a competitive and financial perspective. For its part, government wants to provide the right conditions to enable businesses to take this journey, and this is being done through it in a variety of different ways. Firstly, by providing investment certainty. The programme for government commits to a carbon tax of €100 a tonne by 2030, based on a defined glide path to get there. Companies therefore have enough notice to make the investments required to make either the carbon-saving investments or operational changes that are needed. This is complemented through the provision of state supports. Enterprise and agencies and bodies such as SEAI are assisting firms in making their investment and business decisions as we transition to a low-carbon economy. The government also funds a range of energy efficiency and renewable energy supports for business to support and enable them as they reduce energy consumption and reduce costs to make them more competitive. Local authorities and the Climate Action Regional Offices, the CAROs, also have a crucial role to play, and I'm pleased to see representatives of several local authorities are going to be here today. Since 2018, 4 CAROs funded by my department have been working with the local authorities, with my department and with other stakeholders to ensure that there's a coordinated approach to the climate change challenge at local level. The CAROs focus on the risks in each geographical area, and their role has been expanded to include facilitating local authorities in meeting both mitigation and adaptation commitments under the Climate Action Plan. The Dublin Metropolitan CARO has been in the vanguard in meeting the challenge of climate crisis and has worked with the local authorities on the development of the climate action plans for the period from 2019 to 2024. Under the Climate and Low Carbon Development Act, CAROs are currently working with my department, the EPA, and other stakeholders to develop new guidelines for local authorities to ensure an effective and consistent approach to the development of the local authority climate action plans, which are now required of all local authorities under the new Act. My department has also supported the CAROs by making available a total of over €1.2 million for 2020 and 2021 to fund an intensive training programme for local authority staff. So far, hundreds of senior staff and elected members have received general awareness training in climate action as it relates to local government. And as we emerge from the current crisis brought about by COVID-19, it's crucial that we embed climate resilience and sustainability as part of our overall recovery. We need to build back better. And in doing so, we must make structural changes that will break the link between fossil fuels and economic progress, and ensure that our post-COVID-19 recovery plan is fully consistent with the decarbonising economic transformation needed over the coming decade. I wish you best of luck with your work today. I regret I can't be there in person, but I look forward to hearing the reports back on the good work you're doing. Thank you.
Ara Garamila Mahagut, let us bring in the Chief Executive of Offaly County Council, Anna Marie Delaney, who has, like myself, been here throughout the last 2 days, listening to all of the contributors, giving us a bit of inspiration more than anything else, Anna Marie, because, sometimes you come away from conferences, go, well, what direction are we heading? But I have to say, in this context, I think we know the direction of travel, don't we? We know where we're going now, and more importantly, we see the opportunities that are there.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan, and thanks to everybody for joining us again today, and a particular thanks to our speakers and the contributors over the past 2 days. Yeah, I think again today, so much information, and I think we have plenty of food for thought and action, both for the local government sector through our economic remit and our local enterprise office network, and also for the project steering group for climate action going forward. A wealth of information from speakers, and I suppose Minister Ryan there, just to acknowledge his attendance today, talking about how the CAROs, Climate Action Regional Office, are working with local authorities and assisting him also in the development of new guidelines for local authorities. So, I mean, one of our speakers mentioned earlier the fact that a lot of the work, I think it was Andy mentioned that a lot of the work local authorities are doing around the mitigation piece rather than the adaptation piece. But I think we're moving towards that piece now. A lot of the low-hanging fruit has been probably looked at and resolved, and initiatives and practices changed to cater for that. And I think the adaptation piece is where we're going. But apart from that, so much information today there about the move to carbon neutrality, the need to ensure that nobody is left behind, ensure that we have a fair transition. And really that's our task going forward. I think Marie said that Marie said that there was no such thing as a no option. Climate change is a very significant challenge to which we will all have to respond and adapt, and we'll have to do that immediately, because every small change is making a difference. And if you look at the change by degrees piece and the 1.5 degrees reduction in temperatures agreed at the Paris Agreement, we're looking at all of that now in terms of grasping those new opportunities that are there for renewable energies and jobs and for economic development. So there's quite a bit there in that, Jonathan. We've heard examples and case studies that have looked at the best practice in climate action initiatives on an international basis. And particularly those, I suppose it was interesting, particularly those highlighting collaborative actions between the local authorities, government and private sector in funding projects of scale. Economic benefits that were cited there as well for tourism initiatives and tourism businesses around eco-cities, green and blue ways, from the biodiversity plans that are mentioned as well. And I think, I suppose, also acknowledging, because this is in relation to local authorities supporting enterprise, acknowledging the challenges and the pressures for enterprise in becoming more sustainable, and the supports that are available to them, both financial and soft supports that are available to enable those companies to develop their business plans to ensure the sustainability for the new economy. And I think Pádraig and Mark gave us a great overview of those as well today. The importance of skills availability and training for new jobs. You can see it there in the panel discussion as well, where the new job's going to come from, what's available. And I think from the local authority point of view, and particularly, I suppose, in terms of regional collaboration and our remit under the regional enterprise plans as well, we would look at collaboration with a range of stakeholders across the region, whether they be the technological universities, or at local level, our education and training boards, in terms of training opportunities that are available for people that want to develop new businesses, upskill or retrain in these areas, particularly the renewable energy piece. I suppose Pádraig said it's all about making progress bit by bit, and I suppose local authorities can also play that role in terms of planning and building for green enterprise, and I suppose utilising the guidance that's there from planning point of view, planning law and legislation, and making step-by-step progress on those. We've heard from Green Rebel there about the renewables and producing clean green hydrogen for Ireland and for Europe, and routes to the market for that energy. A very interesting conversation, and we could listen to that for a long time, and listen to more from Catherine there. And I suppose just on Catherine's point as well, Jonathan, it just shows how mobile we have all become over the last while in terms of our ability to interact and to work. And I suppose the remote working piece as well has a role to play, and the local authorities will have a role to play in that. Just listening to Niall there and the innovative heating solutions and the questions that came up in the panel discussion, a lot of interest around that, and a lot of concerns, I suppose, about cost of home heating going forward. And then the partnership model or partnership approach that's working for Gaeltech in their project development business. I suppose all of this is showing that the business opportunities from climate action initiatives around the country and around the globe. So I suppose that's really what a sum up of today. And I think it's been very beneficial. I hope everybody else enjoyed it and found that it was relevant. And I think we need some of those transformative solutions to achieve that goal of climate neutrality, to preserve the natural environment, to create those job opportunities, and in doing all of that, to bring everyone along in a just and fair manner. And I believe that the role of local government in this is very significant. And I think this was highlighted today.
Okay.
Thanks,
Anna-Marie,
Jonathan.
it's been fabulous. Thank you so much for all the support that you've given this event to the team at Carrow and everybody who has put it all together. Thank you. To those of you who are watching right now, remember, you're the ones who are here today. You're the ones who need to become advocates, who need to take the messages that are there and spread them amongst your organization. So you are effectively the champions of change when it comes to this transition. Let's stop looking at it in the way of going, this is an inconvenience, or this is something that's going to upset or discommode. This is an opportunity, an incredible economic opportunity to reinvigorate parts of our country that might not have seen this level of economic potential before. That's the scale of what we're talking about here. It's brilliant to be part of an opportunity. And that's what we are. Local government can really create an environment in which we can all thrive. So let's take that as the message we're leaving with here today. Thank you so much to all of the speakers. Thank you so much to everybody who has tuned in and watched it over the last little while. All of the slides will become available if you have registered for this event. And if you have any questions, the team will be more than happy to take them from you. But from everybody who took part in this event, from everybody who organized it right around Ireland, thank you for making this a national event. And mind yourselves, we'll see you again soon.